Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the meeting of the Fairfax Planning Commission, Wednesday, November 18th. And I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. And the next item is to have the roll call.
Okay, Kierline, Newton.
Here.
Hamilton. Here. Fragoso. Here. Ackerman. Here. Gonzalez-Parber. Here. Chair Green.
Here. Okay, we appear to have a quorum, so that way we'll continue on with business. Have we all read the agenda, and can I entertain a motion to approve the agenda, or are there any comments?
I just had a question for staff about your decision to put the 32 Porteous Avenue on consent, given that it's a 50% remodel and a design review. I don't personally have any issues where I would want to pull it off of consent because of the proposal. We just don't usually see 50% remodels and design review on a consent, so I just had a question about that.
Yeah, you know, if it had been on a hillside or something where there's some tricky drainage or something, I probably wouldn't have put it on consent, but this is a flat lot and they're not requesting any variances. They're bringing their parking into compliance with the code, and the additions, even, you know, you can get to a 50% remodel without really changing the outside of the house very much. And so the addition's really in the back and you don't see it. So that was why I decided to put it on consent.
I had a question too.
On the
Yeah. So some of the supplementary information we got had, I thought, different numbering, but maybe I'm wrong.
Like address numbering or like resolution numbering, where I just made an error?
Item number. So maybe it's just the discussion items.
Oh, you mean the numbers of don't match the numbers on the agenda?
Yeah.
Oh.
On some of the supplementary stuff, I thought there.
So the discussion items, you mean?
Yeah, it might be just misnumbered.
Yeah, the discussion items we didn't number. We just called them discussion.
On the report, they're numbered, but not on the agenda.
Well, they're number 5 on the agenda, but it's okay. I just want to make sure that everybody knows which of the supplementary information goes with which agenda item.
So let's see here.
Through the chair, is mine working?
So 5 is listed as the minutes, and it's the minutes.
Yeah, it seems the discussion items aren't numbered.
On the agenda, the discussion items are not numbered. On the report addressing all the discussion items, they're numbered.
Right, they are, yes.
What is your report for? Your report is item 4. Right, I understand. Right, I understand.
Oh, you know, it was that blank page on number 4, I think, that threw.
Okay. If this gives you any comfort level, the items that are people's projects, I believe, are all numbered correctly on the agenda. So I think we're okay. But if you want to make sure, just make sure when we start talking about it that you read the address out, and I think that'll make sure that anyone in the audience that wants to speak to an item, make sure they speak to it.
Okay, another comment on the agenda. Go ahead.
I was also a little confused why Bolinas Road has 2 agenda items, but they're the same application, and why that wasn't a single agenda item. And
I will explain. There are 2 different applicants, and the one application for the weightlifting studio came in prior to the modification of the overall use permit. The overall use permit is being applied for by the property owner, and the first one for suites A and B is being applied for by the business applicant. They're different applicants. Same building. Well, I just felt that, you know, they're different applications and you have 2 different applicants. It wouldn't really be fair to have one application affect another application. I mean, even though it's the same property, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, maybe then it's a typo because they both have the same application number. 02-39.
Yeah, because they're both modifying the original use permit that was approved in 2002. So we could have combined them, but since they were different applicants, I didn't really think that was the right thing to do.
Or likewise, we could have given them different application numbers, but they're sort of under the same.
Umbrella, multiple use.
Through the chair. Okay, I also had the exact same questions. My fellow commissioner did, and I would in fact like to pull both consent items, not because I have a problem with them, but I think they merit a small amount of discussion, and I think we can get through them quickly if the commissioners concur with that.
Well, I personally had two minor language additions for the conditions on both those consent items, but I don't think that would normally bring that off the consent agenda. So if any other commissioners, thoughts on this?
I'm sorry, you have to be on mic.
I think if anybody wants to pull the consent item off, then we probably need to pull it off. I mean, that's what I thought the protocol would be, but I have no objection to pulling it off. I don't have any particular comments on them, though.
Well, I don't have any problem bringing those into the public consent items category.
I'm sorry, if you pull the mic.
I don't have any problem making 32 Porteous Avenue and 1906 Sir Francis Drake hearing items. Is there anybody here for either of those properties? Okay, so we do have some public interested in those. So why don't someone care to make a motion then to pull those off of consent?
I so move.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so items number 1 and 2, which were on the consent calendar, will now come into the public hearing calendar. But before we get there, let me just mention the protocol is that if anybody, it's quite an audience out there, if anybody wants to speak regarding any property, if you could keep yourself to 2 to 3 minutes, it would be greatly appreciated. So now do we have a motion to approve the agenda as reconstructed?
I move to approve the agenda with the consent items moved to public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I have an announcement I'd like to make before we do the public comments.
That's the next thing. The public, the staff has, Jim Moore has some introductions to make, I believe. So, Jim?
Yes,
it's all yours.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, members of the audience here tonight, and also watching at home, either live or in the future, I have the pleasure of introducing our new zoning technician, Michelle Levinson, who we are so happy to have on board. This is her second week joining us. She is a resident of San Anselmo, has a husband and 2 small children, and comes to us after 14 years with the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, doing permitting for BCDC, and prior to that was with a very distinguished consulting firm, LSA and Associates, working on CEQA and NEPA documents. So we are really lucky to have landed Michelle, stolen her away from BCDC, reduced her carbon footprint, and she's going to be a happy camper, I think, and she's just already fitting in so well. So I encourage you to come by and say hello when you're picking up your packets. She's sitting in the conference area in the middle, which is a great hub to be a sponge of all that goes on with us. So welcome, Michelle, and thank you for accepting the assignment. Yeah, great. And then, moving into the public comments phase on non-agenda items, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I would just like to introduce somebody that is actually involved with the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, who is going to be taking advantage of the open mic time, but because I'm a member, as you know, appointed to the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, actually happen to be the chair at the moment, and I'm very happy to introduce Paulina Osipova, who is the Outreach Associate for Resilient Neighborhoods, which I think some of you have seen their program before. But MCEP, the Marin Climate Energy Partnership, is actually actively supporting them now financially, and that, along with some other funds, allowed to bring Paulina on. So Paulina, with that, I think we'll open up the public mic, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Hello. Okay, great. All right, thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to tell you a little bit about our program. My name's Paulina. Thanks for introducing me, Jim. So I think many of you are aware of our program, but I just want to give you a little update about what we've been working on. We've been working throughout Marin to help families take on climate change by helping them reduce their own greenhouse gas emissions, prepare for emergencies, and build community. Fairfax's Climate Action Committee has made it one of their priorities to support and promote our program, and the Town Council endorsed this 2 years ago. Since we started, Fairfax has had almost 100 people in 29 households complete one of our eco-teams, reducing over 376,000 pounds of carbon emissions. So even though Fairfax has a smaller population compared to other jurisdictions in Marin, you are in third place currently in terms of number of participants, behind San Rafael and the unincorporated areas of the county. So as you know, you are awesome. Countywide, our program has had 575 people participate and reduced 2.6 billion pounds of CO2 emissions. This year, as Jim mentioned, we received support from the Marin Climate and Energy Partnership, which will help us expand our program throughout the county. For those of you that are not familiar with us, I'll just give you a brief overview of what we do. We empower people to take action on climate change in their own lives. So in a county where 60% of the carbon emissions come from residents, this is really important. Our program is free and it's fun. It's set up like a Weight Watchers program where households go on a diet to lose 5,000 pounds of carbon. We also help people prepare for the changes that are coming by actually taking emergency preparedness actions and building community. As you have heard, there are a lot of changes predicted for Marin as the climate changes, including a 4- to 5-fold increase in wildfires, sea level rise, prolonged droughts, and more severe storms. Studies have shown that the people that do best after surviving a disaster are the people that have the best social infrastructure, those that are part of a strong community. So we want to help cultivate that. Obviously, Fairfax is already a very strong community, but we want to contribute to that effort. The program is fun and effective because you do it in a team of 5 or more households, and these can be friends, neighbors, coworkers, and people from church, book clubs, or other groups. The team meets 5 times with the Resilient Neighborhoods coach and chooses from a menu of over 100 actions that reduce emissions or build community resilience. People can start a team or join one that we already have going. So we're going to be having an introductory meeting, hopefully in this building in January. I don't have the date yet, but stay tuned and people will be able to attend and learn more about the program, sign up for a team. However, if you're interested now, don't wait. We have folks in Fairfax that are looking for other team members. So if you reach out to us at resilientneighborhoods@gmail.com or check out our website at resilientneighborhoods.org, you can learn about the program and get in touch with us. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Could you repeat just a little more slowly so people can take notes, the email and the contact information? Thank you.
Of course. The website is resilientneighborhoods.org, no spaces, just regular spelling, and it's the email address is resilientneighborhoods@gmail.com. Again, no spaces.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Something we are definitely concerned about. Okay. So since we have moved the consent items onto the agenda.
Public comment.
Well, okay. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items? Anybody out there just has something to say about the town? Yes.
Would this be the proper time to speak on the Airbnb issue?
Well, you could speak on it when we get to that on the calendar. We are going to get to the Airbnb issue.
Is that tonight?
Yes.
There's not enough agendas. We don't have one.
I believe there's a copy of the agenda on the safe out in the lobby.
There's so many people here, there may not have been enough.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the Airbnb is on the discussion items, which is actually the last item on the agenda. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Anybody else with a public comment on something that is not on the agenda? Okay. Very good. Then we'll move on to the consent items. The first one, the new public hearing item, number 1, 32 Porteous Avenue, application 15-33.
okay, so the proposed project encompasses the remodel and expansion of a 1,383 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath, single-family residence into a 1,691 square foot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family residence. The proposal complies with all the setback requirements. The addition is remaining 1 story, so the house is well below the permitted 28.5 feet in height and 2 stories. The parcel exceeds the minimum parcel size by 750 square feet. It's before the commission because the parcel was created at a time when it was standard to create 50-foot wide lots in Fairfax. And so the only thing that's requiring the use permit is the 50-foot width of the property. The purpose of the use permit process is to allow the proper integration into Fairfax of uses which might be suitable only in certain locations in the town or in a zone, or only if the uses are designed or laid out on the site in a particular manner. Houses in this neighborhood on parcels of similar sizes range from a 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath residence to a 2,543 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2.5-bath residence. The proposed 1,691 square foot residence will fit in with the surrounding neighborhood and is not out of proportion with its 6,250 square foot site. The project does constitute a 50% remodel, and so it does require design review. No changes will occur to the front of the house that's visible from the street. It's occurring kind of to the side and the rear. They're going to match the existing house with board and batten siding and paint it to match the existing. So we've determined that the proposed design and location complies with the design review criteria. Therefore, and the applicants are also modifying the driveway so that they will bring the property into compliance with the required parking. So they currently only have 2 complying spaces. They will have 3 complying spaces, one of them covered in the garage when the project is completed. So we're recommending that you approve application 1533 by adopting resolution 1532, which sets forth the findings and conditions for approval.
Okay, thank you. Any comment from our commission or questions of staff?
I just had 1 or 2 comments. Basically, I agree with the staff report. And the only significant comment I wanted to make is that there seems to be a lot of construction right around there. There are 3 other properties under construction, and I just want to make sure that I can get out of the neighborhood when I have to. The other day, there were 5 cars lined up in each direction behind the garbage trucks. And so just for staff to be aware of that and maybe coordinate. And I was out to look at the construction today. It seems very reasonable. It should be very attractive, a very modest expansion that if they can maintain the side yard setbacks, I don't have a problem with it. And I noticed that they have drip irrigation, which I was very happy to see. But other than that, I'm pleased with the project.
Norma, in the resolution, if you turn to page 3, under number 3B, all construction-related vehicles, including equipment, deliveries, cement trucks, and construction materials, shall be situated off the travel lane of the adjacent public right-of-way at all times. This condition may be waived by the building official on a case-by-case basis with prior notification from the project sponsor.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, other comments or questions?
No, I think, okay. No, I don't, I agree with the staff report on this, and I was just going to say that maybe to expedite the public trying to figure out what their comments may or may not be time-wise, that if there was any concerns that people have, that we might want to bring it up now, and if not, it was on consent, and we were, I think, pulling it from a more process perspective rather than a content of this, so just wanted to say that.
Okay, well, I had actually, whether this was a consent item or a public hearing item, I had one phrase to add to, because of the location of the property, to add to the conditions. So on page 4 of the resolution, under 5, there's B now, and I would add a C, which says, no occupants may have any fire prior to the installation of sprinklers and smoke detectors. And this is based on the location of the property and that we've had some situations in the last few months regarding someone lighting a fire in a partially rebuilt home and having serious consequences. Okay, all right. Thank you. Any comments on my comment? Anybody? Okay. Okay, so we'll open this to...
Oh, I just had a typo I'll give you later.
Okay, so is there anybody out there we'll open this now to public comments on 32 Porteous Avenue, if there are any. Is the applicant present? If the applicant would like to say anything? Yes? Would you like to make a comment, please?
My name is Ann Bull. I'm the applicant. I don't have anything to add unless you have additional questions. I'm happy to answer questions.
I kind of like the project myself, so I didn't have any questions either. Okay, thank you very much.
I will move approval of use permit and design review application number 1533 with the correction made to the resolution.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So now, just so to be clear, that means that we have 32 Porteous Avenue will have its permits, and we have approved the permits.
And there is an appeal period?
I'm just about to get to that. There is a 10-day appeal period and a $500 fee payable to the town clerk, and the appeal goes to the town council if anybody's interested in that. Okay, so we'll close the public hearing on 32 Porteous Avenue, and thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item number 2, which has become a public hearing item of 1906 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard, application number 15-34.
Okay, so I'll just give you a little history that our zoning ordinance in Fairfax hasn't been updated since 1973, and so there are a number of businesses that have become acceptable or new businesses that didn't exist in the 70s, and so our list is very antiquated. And the applicants are applying for a use permit so that they can open a tattoo studio. They're requesting, they're going to have 3 chairs and a reception area with a waiting area. And so they're planning to have a maximum number of persons in the shop at any one time, estimated to be 7 or 8, and all of the employees of the business currently live in Fairfax. The way the business plans to operate is very much like a specialty retail business or a hair salon, and we ran this by our traffic engineer, who agreed that he wouldn't expect a tattoo studio to generate any more traffic than a hair salon. So we did not feel the use required any kind of a traffic permit or a parking variance. They are going to require design review because they are planning to repaint the outside of the building, but it's going to be a yellow palette that will be similar to the surrounding building, and so we feel it meets the design review criteria. And so we're recommending that you approve the proposed use by adopting resolution number 1535 that sets forth the findings and conditions for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll bring it to the Planning Commission to ask questions of staff about this project.
I ask that the item be discussed in a public hearing because it is a very new business for us and has not heretofore been included in the list of allowable businesses. And also because we will be reviewing some comments submitted by one of our commissioners to the descriptor of the list of allowable businesses. And I just wanted to make sure that he was okay and this was in keeping with the recommendations that our chairman is making with regard to those descriptors. And I had a question regarding the staff. I'm delighted to see that something is going in that building, and I think tattoo parlors are great if they're well run and maintained, particularly. I did have a question about the staff. I understand there'll be 7 staff, which is fantastic, especially if they live in Fairfax, but I want to make sure that they're not taking up the parking spaces on the street. Maybe I don't know that
you can regulate the public parking. I mean, you can try to encourage them not to use it, but
This is another topic that we hope to take up when we do the forums on the creation of a town center plan. It's a global issue with employees. This is an old story in several towns where employees often take the prime spots on the street and go out and race the marks to meet the meter maid. But it's some of the prime parking. So we need to address it on a global level, and hopefully we will this spring or summer when we get to the forums.
Right, that's true, but I would at least like to put the owner on notice that it would be greatly appreciated, even though we can't require it, if you could have employees not take up the Sir Francis Drake parking, particularly since they live there.
Now, I see a hand up in the audience, and if you just be patient, we will get to public comments on this project. And any comments have to be made in the microphone as well. So if just, okay. I have one comment on this project and a condition also in the permit. So let me make the comment first. Those who run this tattoo studio probably understand that nobody under 18 can even be offered admission to the tattoo parlor under Penal Code Section 653. I have that here if they want to look at it. So I'm just going to request that there be some sign, just like there is at the outside of a bar, not letting nobody under 21 type of thing. There be a sign placed in the window prominently under our signage regulations, of course, that says something to the effect of no one under 18 can be admitted. The other thing is I would like to add, and it's funny because in the staff report there's a 5 and a 7, but there's no paragraph 6 in the resolution, so I'm going to add one. And that is that as some members have mentioned, approval of this use permit does not add tattoo studios, in quotes, to ordinance 17100.040 capital A. And that's the only other condition I would place on the resolution. Any other comments from the planning commissioners?
You'll have a chance to deliberate after you're done with your questions from us, opened up to the public.
Which is what we will do now, if we have no further comments. So anybody from the public would like to comment on this project, please do. And try to keep it to 2 to 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Roach. I'm one of the owners of the proposed shop. But just to make something clear, we only have 4 employees, actually. We all live here. I don't own a car.
Yeah, we're all walking to work happily, which will reduce carbon too.
Yeah,
Thanks.
what I meant by that was that there's 4 employees and 3 chairs. So if there were 3 customers in there, there would be a total of 7 people.
Yeah, that's what we have.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's welcomed. Walk to town whenever possible. Yes, sir, please.
I just wanted to, hi, I'm Simon Caster. I'm a local resident here in Fairfax and a great supporter of this venture. 2 things that I wanted to point out. The parking spaces that you were concerned about right in front of the business, they're actually 30-minute limit parking spaces, and it's enforced constantly by the Fairfax PD, so I don't think that's a worry. And the second thing is your signage that you were talking about for being under 18. Ironically, the previous business that was in the left-hand side of this space was the head shop, and stenciled on the window it says, no one under 18 will be admitted. So it's already there, just so you know. Thank you.
Could you, sir, could you please turn the microphone off because it dims all? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes. Okay, then you could leave that sticker on the window. That's fine. So any other comments on this project? Okay, seeing none, then we will close the public hearing period. And any other discussion?
I just want to make a comment. I appreciate the condition of the 18 years and older. I think that's very important. I wasn't sure what the law required. I have a question, actually. I should have asked Adam Roach when he was here. How would you enforce that age requirement? Or how do you typically enforce it now?
Well, in most tattoo shops, you have to check IDs, and you make a photocopy of the ID and a consent form for that specific person, which you have on record if they want to return. But you check their ID like a bar or something like that would do. And by the way, we're very well versed in sterility and enforcing these laws. It's important to us.
All right, thank you. I support this project, just for the record.
That's great. Thanks.
Yes, apparently a new modern art form. Okay, wonderful. So shall I entertain a motion to approve the application with the condition?
I'll move to approve Resolution 1535 with the addition suggested by the chair.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, looks like you're going to have your tattoo parlor, and it's going to be very interesting.
There is a 10-day appeal period.
There is a 10-day appeal period. From the response of the audience, it doesn't seem like you are interested, but there is a 10-day appeal period, and there's a $500 fee payable to the town clerk. Thank you very much. All those who were here for that project and have no interest in future project we're discussing tonight can go. You're all set. Okay, we'll move on to the next public hearing item, which is item number 3, 31 Bolinas Road, Suites A and B, application 02-39, and staff report, please.
Okay, so as you know, on May 22nd, 2015, you modified the original use permit for this complex of buildings that was issued in 2002 to allow a mixed use. Unfortunately, the mixed use didn't include this next applicant who wants to open a health facility that will specialize in providing Olympic weight training to individuals. So it does require a modification of the use permit. The proposed hours of operation will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. During a typical day, there would be as many as 20 persons at a time in the facility. They are planning on having maybe 4 times a year some events, weightlifting, sports, performance, coaching, training courses, and 4 local competitions where the number of expected participants, coaches, and spectators will be roughly 40. The project requires, as I said, approval of a use permit. We discussed this with the town traffic engineer, and as you know, the previous use permit modification was modeled on a much heavier traffic use, a high-end restaurant being in this location. And so, if anything, this use is going to lower the amount of cars parking in the parking lot and the amount of traffic coming to the site. The project does not require design review because the outdoor area where they are planning to have some weightlifting occur was already approved. The trellis structure was approved for the outdoor restaurant seating, and they're not planning on making any changes to the landscaping or anything. So previously, the town has issued use permits for 2 other similar type businesses, actually 3 on Bolinas Road. The women's fitness gym used to be at 85 Bolinas. It's now Yoga Mountain. And there's the dance studio across the street, which is a similar use, and they all seem to have been very successful and not detract from the surrounding businesses. And so we are recommending that you approve application 0239, the modification to 0239, by adopting resolution 15-36, setting forth findings and conditions for approval.
Thank you very much. So commissioners, questions for staff?
Through the chair, can you clarify for me, because I got my plans and reports mixed up, that we are looking at the plans with the photograph of the building up front attached, and it says 31A and B Bolinas Road, whereas the other set of plan just says 31 Bolinas Road.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, this is for suites A and B, so space A and B.
And then for A and B,
they're the 2 front spaces immediately adjacent to the parking lot.
right. I'm confused though, on page 2, are the restrooms shown on page 2 what were approved before, or is this one of the changes?
No, they actually were approved before. They're shared restrooms for the other businesses as well.
Okay.
This business is planning to put in a shower in their space. If you look, you can see the little...
In that corner with the 5-foot diagonal?
Right.
In B.
Right.
For a wheelchair turnaround?
Right.
Okay, and the restrooms are existing, and those do not change. And then the weightlifting goes in to the front A, space A. So those 2, A and E, will continue to be divided and separate uses.
Yes. E is proposed for something else.
But A and B would be the same weightlifting
Right.
business in the 2 different spaces now.
Right.
All right, thank you.
And the outside area.
And I do have some questions about the use and storage of that equipment, of the racks out on in the outdoor seating area, which is now a rack system. I don't know, maybe you could just, or they could tell us a little more about.
I think they're probably going to have to address that. I'm assuming it's some kind of a fixed rack system, but I don't know that much about it. I'm sure they're concerned about, vandalism too, so I wouldn't imagine them to leave anything
Having
out.
expensive equipment outdoors. Okay.
I have a question. Actually, I think this was not part of the report. It was a letter from Logan and Noah Miller. They talk about the old Fairfax Weightlifting Center under the stewardship of Coach Stephen Goff. I was wondering where that was.
The applicants can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a similar type use that used a room in the back of the Fairfax gym across from what is now the Good Earth, and I think that's where it was located. Am I correct about that?
Originally, they were at the Fairfax Health Club, and then eventually we were given a nonprofit status and moved to Drake High School. We were in the old.
I'm sorry.
If you could
I'm sorry,
step
we're
to
gonna-
the microphone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The original facility was housed at the Fairfax Health Club in the back room. And then eventually when the program grew, we were granted space from the school district at Drake High School where it stayed until after the 1996 Olympic Games. It was a Western Regional Olympic Training Center classified by the Olympic Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Any other? Now, you're going to have to watch out when he starts lifting weights, because you won't be able to do that. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay.
I actually have a question, just because it is a little confusing what we're approving. I want to make sure that we're just approving the use permit modification, not necessarily the equipment that's going in the trellised area, correct?
No, you are. They want that equipment, they want it out there, and they want to work.
So that would be included?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But any concerns regarding the building itself would be on the next agenda item, correct?
Well, the new windows and the new skylights and everything, that's the owner's application that comes next. This is just for the use of the established spaces, and all this applicant's doing is putting in that shower.
Yep.
And then he's going to make his own improvements inside for the weightlifting and put the rack out in the outdoor area.
And the door instead of the window onto the front.
Yeah, and that is on your next one. That's in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, it's an improvement will benefit any tenant that's in the building. So the owner is taking responsibility for those exterior improvements.
We have two things.
Yeah.
The owner's in motion of improving the property. The owner's improving the whole property. And then this is a tenant that's come along for space A and B in the outdoor space. And if you recall, I actually brought it to you just informally because it didn't quite fit the definition of personal service. So it's just the use permit for this business going in those two interior spaces and the outside seating area. And then we'll get to the more global issues of the modifications to the design review, et cetera, in the next item.
Through the chair. At what point will we talk about the required parking spaces? Would that come now? Are there a certain number of spaces dedicated to this business and then others for the rest of the building? Would we discuss that with the next application?
Nothing is changing from what you approved in May, nor the impacts thereof. So there's no changing with the parking variance. With a parking variance. So parking is as it was approved in May for this and the next item.
Because the town traffic engineer verified that this type of use is going to generate a much less traffic and much less need for parking than what it was modeled for, which was for a high turnover restaurant.
I understand. So then, Mike, how many spaces are actually required? Are the 19 parking spaces still required for the building combined? Or do we now have an extra parking space?
We don't really know that yet because we don't really know what the back corner is going to be.
And if we have an extra parking space, and when we get to our next application, if there's a live work, that might trigger an extra space. That's why I'm trying to figure out the count.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, depending upon what ends up going in, he'll either be fitting under the number of parking spaces that are there, or if he finds a tenant that's going to generate a high use, it might kick them into coming back in front of you for some kind of a parking variance. But what's going on tonight, we didn't feel, based on what our traffic engineer told us, that there was any need to modify the parking as approved. But I understand what you're saying.
And I understand your rationale as well. And then my other question is, was the original restaurant use going to start up at 6 a.m. as well? That seemed a little earlier. But then I'd like to know if this business would have 6 a.m. trucks backing in.
That's something you can ask the applicant
when we get to the public hearing.
Yeah, and the restaurant, when you approved the restaurant use here, we had no tenant that was a restaurant.
Right.
So we didn't know. They could open at 6 for breakfast. I mean.
Okay, we can talk about that with the applicant.
Okay, I had a question. Was there any consideration, apparently this is tied in with, and this is wonderful actually, but I just want to ask, U.S. Olympic Committee and the USA weightlifting organization as to whether this is any kind of formula business or not. Is this, was that a consideration?
It wasn't for me, but you'll have to double check that with the applicant. You don't own any other businesses that are, oh, yeah, okay.
Okay. Any other commissioner questions for staff? Okay. Okay, maybe we can have the applicant come up and say a few words about this project.
I'm going to start. I'm Fred Devine. I'm the architect. To do the global stuff, I won't try to answer all the questions that Yasha could answer about the exact use.
Fred,
yes.
We're not on the global issues now. We're just on Yasha.
I'm talking the global issues about Yasha.
Okay.
I'm not confused. So, first of all, I need to say, separate, this is incredible. I can't hear. I never can hear here. I broke my hearing aid about 2 weeks ago, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to deal with this. This thing is incredible. The only thing some of you have to learn is to speak closer to the mic and make sure it's on, but I just can't tell you how wonderful it is. I used to sit at that table, and it was hard back in those days too. So thank you very much. To clarify, and it's been said several times, and Jim stole some of my thunder right there, is that this is here because the use we thought was going to fit within the use permit, but didn't quite, and I think he did bring it to you guys, and it wasn't quite there. So this is here. It's an applicant-driven situation for the tenant to get it approved for the use. The one part of it that's different outside of that use, which you may have some questions about on the interior, is the use of the exterior, which isn't now a patio where people are eating, but because it's a different tenant, where they would propose to have this rack, and then some weightlifting would go on there. Yasha will speak to it a little clearer, but I believe it's the rack that just sits there, and the equipment will move in and out because they're not going to leave equipment out there to be tampered with, stolen, whatever. It's going to move in and out, and in fact, the control point for the patio, if you look at the plan, is right there as you come in the door, so that there's very solid control. It's not like it's a desk way back in the back. We thought, and we're glad, the staff report's great, we thought this fit and that it was a little different, but that there are other uses like this. Linda mentioned the ones right on Bolinas, but of course there's the Fairfax gym, which I don't know about you, I walk by all the time, and I can see into that room where people are doing yoga, and I can see into the gym. It's got this outside use that is similar to the patios at bars, a little different way it's being used. So I think the best way to move forward on this is really, if you have questions of Yasha or of me in terms of the use, and I would second the thing that the traffic count is way down. Even for the next application, it doesn't really apply, but for this, the traffic count is just way down from, it could have been a restaurant, which would have been way higher. So unless you have other questions, I would probably open it up for Yasha to answer any questions you might have about how he's going to use it.
Yes, thank you. Fred, I think it'd be a good idea to have Yasha come to the microphone, and we may have some questions of him. If I may start.
Of course.
So is this intended to be some kind of, what's the relationship, I'll just ask this way, between U.S. Olympic Committee and U.S. weightlifting and your business?
I'm the relationship between those entities and the business. I'm a chair member of USA Weightlifting, which is the governing body for weightlifting in the United States and the Olympic Games. And we're affiliated with the Olympic Committee. We're housed under the Olympic Committee's banner. That's where it ends. I've always planned on, since I was a kid, planned on coming back to Fairfax and opening this business. It has nothing, it's not formulaic. I have no interest in expanding. If that's what you're getting at, I don't know. My affiliation with the Olympic Committee it's deep. I have a rich history with them, and it will certainly be a boon to this community because I'll be having high-level athletes and heroes come to town as frequently as I can. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that basically answers my question. Any other commissioners have questions of Yasha?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the letters. I was guilty of preconceived notions, and the letters really opened up my eyes, and I think it's great. I think it's a great service or function. However, I am struggling with the racks out in the front.
Sure.
And I was wondering if you considered, with the architect, maybe pushing them back, or would you consider rotating them? That's very precious real estate just in terms of the public. There's very little public seating in Fairfax. I walk through there all the time. I sit on that bench all the time with my dog, and it just seems that you have an opportunity to push that back and maybe reduce the scale.
Okay. I don't believe the parking lot would allow for it to be pushed back.
Could I answer that?
Sure.
And staff can comment if I'm off base. The patio is approved as it is. If we move it, we're going to eliminate parking from this project. And this is functioning in the exact footprint of what was approved as a patio. And so it would be a significant change if we tried to do anything there. And
But sir, are you saying that the bench that sits in front of that fence would be coming out, or does that remain?
I don't remember that in the design. I would have to look. I would think if there's a bench there that's important, it could go back in, but we're under the approval of the patio that was approved previously, and we're keeping the same one.
There is no bench there. Across the street, there's a bench.
No, there's, is it already gone? It's that, it's like a plaster earthen.
It's one of
with
those
a tree.
earthen
Okay.
benches
Yeah,
that sits
Lydia-
in front of the tree, in front of the fence.
Well, just to be clear, the equipment that I'm going to have out there is very non-intrusive, and the space is going to seem open anyway. It's not as if it's a fixed piece of equipment. It's tall, and the stanchions are skinny, so you will be able to walk freely, sit. The area itself won't be condemned to just that equipment. It will be a passive piece of equipment. In essence, you will still be able to go out there and do other stuff in and around this equipment. And there's a ton of precedence for what I'm doing. It's very common in gyms right now in terms of having this fixed piece of equipment inside and outside.
I think we're trying to get a flavor of the exact size and look of this thing. Are you talking about 10, 14, 20, or 24-inch monster rig?
10, 14, 20. They're 14 foot, not 14 inch. It would be
14 foot,
14
that's
feet wide is the one I think we have scheduled for that space. Whatever works best for that space. But again, I wish I'd provided a photo. The thing itself is, it's not very invasive. It's an open structure. You're not, it doesn't occlude your vision of the back of the parking lot. You'll still be able to see through. People will still be able to enjoy the space there. And in fact, I plan on using that as a consultation area in addition to a workout area. So there will be seating there as well, though, you know.
But it's closed off to the I mean, the public doesn't have any access to that area, really. I mean, it's a little buffered.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, may I point something out? In your plans, you have both the plan view and the elevations on the second page of the outside seating area that was previously approved in May. So the disposition of the outside seating area with its design was approved by you in May, and it's a done deal. It's just the occupancy within that outdoor seating area that's now being discussed. And in the elevation on the second page, I believe you can see the apparatus drawn in.
The question is whether the bench are the trees coming out, and is that bench already out?
The bench is gone, and if you look at the plan view, it's coming up basically to the property edge at the sidewalk. And also, we did receive a complaint about all but the last tree nearest the building having been removed, and I think it's some people may interpret that some of that vegetation that was removed was a shrub or a bush versus a tree, but it did come to our attention that things had been removed out in front there. But I believe maybe Mr. Devine, the architect, could speak to the need to address that vegetation.
There is no change to the original approval, I believe, and there's already a landscape plan that's approved. We didn't present it here because it wasn't germane to what. There's already a landscape plan, I believe, in the previous approval that will be new vegetation that's being put in.
Thank you. It does, and it does show the one tree that's still on the building side towards the building.
One of my colleagues just provided me with an internet photo of a similar rig. If you want, I can walk by and show you all. Would that help?
Sure, let's take a look. Thank you.
This is similar. It's not exactly the same, but you can see the one I'm going to have won't be a fixed wall, it'll be a freestanding structure. But it's very any equipment that goes in and around it will be just.
So you bring weights and hang them on the rack while you're
This would be more like
I'm sorry, folks. We're going to need to get you on the record. So, and if you could email us that photo, that would be very helpful to add to the packet in case this doesn't stop here.
For the record, as staff pointed out, what Yasha has just showed you is in the plans. It's drawn there. It hardly shows because it doesn't have much presence.
Yes, and I realize, it's not the trellis that I'm struggling with. It's the actual piece of equipment, the 9-foot equipment, and the lack of a buffer between the equipment and the public right-of-way. And maybe I don't understand how it's being used. And what I'm hearing is that it's more of a storage system.
Well, if I could walk you through the plans that you have.
Okay.
It's about 8 feet wide by 14 feet, and if you look at the plan on the first page, you can see the trellis drawn. It's in the lower left corner of your first page of drawings, and you can see that the structure laid out there. It's 8 by 14. It's like Yasha said, it's just narrow pipes. Then you can look at the overall site plan and see a smaller of the same picture. Then turn to the second page. and look at the top of the page where it says patio front elevation. And you'll see a sort of a dark area, and then you'll see a trellis, and you'll see a line in between. That's the structure. That's all it is. It's some narrow pipes, and it's behind the rail. It's enclosed by the rail and the trellis that's already a part of this approval. It's just going to sit in there instead of seats, and instead of 48 seats and people.
Those plans include an existing buffer.
It's a buffer. It's landscaped. It's got a rail. It's got a trellis. It's sort of enclosed, except for having walls there, which was nothing has really changed, except that instead of seeing people eating at tables, you will see people periodically lifting weights.
And Mr. Chair, if I could point out something I just caught, there's a slight inconsistency that might help. On the first page, if you look at the plan view in the lower left, it's got the planting scheme, and it's slightly different than the elevation shows, with sort of a cadence of the smaller, what's it called, Oregon grape Mahonia aquaforum. Those are the lower shrubs, but if you look in the plan view, it actually is showing wild grape at the post. So I imagine those wild grapes would grow up the post and into the arbor and create a little bit more of a vegetation screen, if you will, over time from the sidewalk.
Well, actually, Mr. Devine said what I was thinking is we will not be seeing people sitting passively enjoying meals, but the public would be seeing people lifting weights. And of course, the idea of the grapevines, I mean, they're dying off right now, so you just get twigs in winter anyway, which I suspect people will not lift too many weights outdoors in the winter. So that's a concern, a visual difference I see. And when we were discussing this earlier and approved the plan, the idea was this was going to be a restaurant with just people seated. And I think that makes a difference to the public view.
Just so we're all clear, we hope that this business, should you approve it, lasts a long time. But if they ended up going somewhere else or not lasting, then in all likelihood it could be a restaurant again with outdoor seating.
Right. Now, all of what I said, I'm not actually against this project. I think it's a great idea to improve health, especially the health of women, and that's a great thing in our society to do, to promote. But that is an issue, though, what the public will see walking or driving by.
I think we've come to understand the way it's intended to be, and I would suppose over time there'll be more screening as the bushes grow up. But I would suggest that we might hear from other members of the public as to whether there's any concern. That would be where I would go to find out whether there's an aesthetic concern.
Right, okay. So we can bring the applicant back, but I think we should go into the public hearing period and see if anybody has any comments on this project from the audience. Yes, and please step up, 2 to 3 minutes, please, and use the microphone. Red light should go on. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Shane. I guess on the visual concern, it seemed to be okay with having a dance thing on one side of the street and people exercising on another part of town. So I just don't see why that would be a concern at this location. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I'm Stephen Scafani, currently a Novato resident. I'm a paramedic for the San Francisco Fire Department. But in my youth, I spent countless hours at the Fairfax Health Club training in Olympic-style weightlifting. I remember when Yasha first joined us, he took the sport much farther than I ever did. And in fact, since I've met him, he's never stopped being involved with the sport. He spent years at Colorado Springs, Colorado, at the Olympic Training Center. There is no way I can think that his business would be anything but a benefit for Fairfax. And in fact, having people observe either weightlifting or any type of working out on the patio, I think would be nothing but a bonus for both the town and his business. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just on a personal note, I've been one of Yasha's athletes for the last 3 years, and you all want people that he has affected walking around your town. He builds strong people inside and out. Visually, it's actually a beautiful sport to watch. We do amazing things with our bodies, and yeah, he's affected a lot of people in a really positive way. Everyone kind of knows his name. You go to USAW or any of these lifting meets, and Yasha is such a big name. It's actually a really big honor to have him in your town. So I just really support him and this.
Okay, thank you very much.
I need to press some here. My name's Timothy Logan. I'm a Fairfax, Marin County native. I've raised 2 boys here. I graduated Drake High School. I was a member of the weightlifting program that Yasha talked about. That program from scores and scores of kids went on to produce several national and international Fairfax native competitive athletes and 1 Olympian who competed in the 1996 Olympics. There's so many great things to say about Yasha as a proprietor and the opportunity to have his business in Fairfax, and there's such a tremendous and really illustrious, and these are big words, but it's really true, a rich history that tied directly to Fairfax and Marin County. And I really, I hope the letters conveyed that and whatnot. I didn't get an opportunity to write one of those. But a thought on the visual from outside, in a town where you can't look down the street without seeing, several bars and their signs. It's really, mini restaurants. Think about the message we're conveying when you're actually looking at something that conveys directly to health and mobility and activity. And jumping ahead 20 years later in 2015, when 20 years ago we were Olympic lifting, there wasn't a whole lot known about the sport. It's what big Russian guys did, got up on the stage and did, and some negative connotations and ideas around the sport. But at this date and age, thanks to CrossFit, a very popular form of exercising, they've adopted and recognized all the value in Olympic lifting, and so it's not just about Olympic lifters and a small set of athletes showing up in Fairfax to work out and train with Yasha and to glean his expertise. It's really an opportunity for the town. We had countless athletes, and I was one of those, all of 110 pounds, 15 years old, starting high school, wanting to go out for the football team, and getting sucked into the gym at Fairfax Health Club and ultimately the Olympic lifting program changed my life. And it made me a really tremendous athlete, and CrossFit recognized that, it uses that, and it doesn't just use it for athletes, but just individuals. Everybody, you drive through San Anselmo in the morning, you're gonna see moms, dads, people as they head off to work, teenagers. Both my boys did this and used Olympic lifting to ultimately better themselves. So I think it's going to do so many great things. It's going to turn the eye of the Olympic lifting community and CrossFit community on to Fairfax. It's going to present a place for the community, for our youth to go and train and better themselves, whether they're soccer players, volleyball players, water polo players, sprinters, whatever, or if they don't play any team sports. It's just a really fantastic opportunity, and I hope I was able to give a little history and convey that to you guys. Thank you.
Well, I must say that was one of the most heartwarming testimonials I've heard in a long time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Richardson. So about my professional background around youth, I am part of the West Marin Coalition for Healthy Kids. I work closely with the Youth Leadership Institute in Marin County, and I run a youth job training and internship program out of the San Geronimo Valley Community Center, where I do a lot of youth programming for kids anywhere from 0 to, all the way through transitional age youth around age 25. I'm here tonight because I do work so closely with youth, and I spend a lot of my professional time sort of cultivating these things for youth to do, to sort of open their eyes and to do things other than, what I had when I grew up in the Valley, which is, and I say it all the time, my after-school program was a giant pipe underneath the street. There just wasn't a lot to do before the loft was built above the Lagunitas gym. And when I think about what goes on in town, and we spend a lot of our time doing that, I still don't feel like I feel like there's a huge opportunity for what youth can be doing. And I love the opportunity of having a weightlifting gym available for our young people. And I can see it as a place where a lot of youth congregate, because it's the kind of thing that brings people together. And if you are part of organized sports, or if you're not part of organized sports, it's a great place to go. I'm actually pleased that it's not a place where there would be alcohol being served. I feel like we have a lot of that here. I feel that we're losing something special when we add alcohol to movie theaters now. We're narrowing our places where young people can be without the alcohol option being there. Personally, I was never a weightlifter. I know nothing about weightlifting. But I will say this. I assume that you have a bunch of letters from people like Noah, Logan, people that have known Yasha. This group of people, I didn't hang out with them. I didn't have anything to do with them when I was at Drake High School, when they were at Drake High School. But the reason that I even know them is because they walked and treated me with such kindness and such integrity. And when people talk about why weightlifting, what it does for the person and what that actually means, I don't know what it means for them inside, because like I said, I'm not a weightlifter, but I know what that means when they interact with people. And I cannot say enough about the guys who were part of this program in high school. Every single one of them treated me with kindness, respect, and everyone else that they ever came across. And I just appreciate that so much, because I know that any of these guys could call, whether they were opening up a business, writing a book, creating a movie, and they could call me for support and I would be there instantaneously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
My name is Chris Murray. Yasha approached me a few days ago, asked me to speak about this project of his. Can you hear me? There we go. Anyways, growing up, I used to always watch the Olympics, as we all did. And I always thought to myself, where do these athletes come from? And coming into the training center in 94 to 96, I was probably one of the last athletes to train under Steve Goff, as Yasha's mentor and kind of a second father figure to me. I realized that athletes that made the Olympic team come from these places, these training centers that Yasha is building up right now. So there's nowhere else to look. That's where they're going to come from. Women weightlifting is getting big in this country. So is men's weightlifting. 20 years ago, the weightlifting community was very small. Very quickly, you knew who was who. Now, it's grown exponentially. So I think Yash is going to make a lot of waves in the sport, and I think that building the strength center is going to be a step in the right direction for the sport of weightlifting. And I think that I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm guessing 5 to 10 years, we're going to have an Olympian coming out of that gym. And again, we're going to sit there, remember that tonight, and appreciate the fact that, again, when you built the right training center, doesn't have to be fancy, but you have the right people training the athletes, you're going to have good things happen. And believe me, it's going to happen. So that's why I came here to talk about that. And then again, for my own personal story, because I know Yash wanted me to talk about that, he didn't approach me because I was the best athlete to come out of that training center or the strongest, but 2 years that I was there, I went from basically a relatively unknown, insignificant athlete in high school, and in 2 years I was able to walk on to the Cal football team, and I was the strongest person on the team after just 2 years training specifically Olympic weightlifting. And years later, I became a member of the French national team as a weightlifter. Again, starting out in basically a room about half this size with Steve Goff, who was wearing a T-shirt and a pair of shorts, who just came to the gym after working 10, 12 hours as a cop in San Francisco. And that's the person Yash is going to become. He is already. He's going to give his best. He's going to give his all. And like I said, the truth is in the pudding. We'll have an Olympian out of that gym at some point, and I hope it's going to happen.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to say for brevity purposes, if you could keep it a little shorter. I understand there's quite an emotional overlay here, so.
Sure, I can keep it brief. My name is Jason Holta. I'm a 46-year resident of Marin County, native of Marin County. It's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the commission in support of Yasha Faye's Health Club at 31 Bolinas. I'm an original member of the Fairfax weightlifting team. I've known Yasha since I was a teenager. Having been in Marin a long time, Fairfax is known for its restaurants and bars. It's got a lively community of adult activities, and downtown reflects that. I'd actually like to see downtown reflect some additional activities for youth as well, and I think a public-facing aspect of that would be a benefit to Fairfax. I'm a senior policy analyst for the City of San Francisco in the Office of Early Care and Education. I can speak from the perspective of somebody who's spent much of their professional life working on behalf of youth in San Francisco and in Marin County, having worked at St. Vincent's School for Boys, a residential treatment facility, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But having been a young person weightlifting at the Fairfax Health Club and having met Yasha and some of the other people who have testified today, I can say that it's had a profound impact on my life. It was truly, I grew up in Terra Linda. I commuted to Fairfax to be able to work out at that gym because it was the only place in Marin that offered Olympic weightlifting, and it was something that I was deeply interested in. It's probably one of the most elegant and athletic forms of weightlifting that one could see visually or participate in actively. So as far as its visual presence, I think it would be beautiful for the city of Fairfax and residents and people visiting downtown to be able to see sort of a gender, now what's become a gender neutral sport. You have lots of male and female weightlifters, both youth and adults, and all of that played a huge role in shaping who I am today. So I just want to speak out and support it. I hope the Planning Commission approves this gym. I think it would be a huge benefit to the city of Fairfax, in particular downtown as well. Thank you.
Excuse me, could you turn off the mic? Thank you, because it dims all the, oh, another comment. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Logan, and my husband's here tonight. Both of us support this project completely. Cannot think of a better use for that business space or proprietor than Yasha. My son Tim spoke earlier. We have 5 or 6 young men in the audience that were Fairfax Gym affiliated, Olympic Training, Olympic Center affiliated. I can think of no better from a perspective of health, and additionally for our youth, to have something like this in our community. We absolutely, totally support it. We're 30-year residents, and I owned and operated a business for almost 20 years, Acorn Academy preschool. Not weightlifters, but this guy is wonderful. I think the addition of the gym in the downtown area is going to be fabulous for our youth and everyone else in the community.
Okay, I see nobody wants this gym. Oh, is there another comment? Oh, thank you for turning that off. I appreciate that. Okay. Any other comments from the commission on this?
Through the chair, please. I'm, I guess, what you would call a wimpy weightlifter. Nothing of Olympic character, but I am somewhat familiar with the Olympic Training Center designation. I know that it is a very special program, and in fact, I'm even familiar personally with one of your references down in a peninsula weight training program. Excuse me. And I'm obviously very impressed with your supporters here this evening, but in particular, with your letters of support, especially from a retired police officer. I don't have a problem with the use weight training at this location. I think that's fine. I had some concerns about the rack system outside perhaps attracting nuisance activities. In the evening time, perhaps when no one is there, but given the recommendations and the high praise that you get from your neighbors, I imagine that you will take care of that. My two biggest concerns are smaller in scale, but important for me, that I would not like to see the windows on Sir Francis Drake closed off. I think it's important that we be able to see through the windows, people in and out. Obviously, there might be a certain amount of privacy, but I'd like to see them so that there's views in and out of the windows. And my other concern is that I know you're putting in a landscape system. We can't require this of you, but if you could do a drip irrigation system, that would be great. It would help the plants survive, and it would also conserve water. Otherwise, I don't have a problem with this application with those two concerns.
Okay, any other comment? I think I'm going to sign up. Upper body is one of my weaknesses.
I have a question for the owner, yes. Can you tell me why is it so important to have the monster rack outside?
It's not. It's just a piece of equipment that it's important to my business. I'll have one inside as well. It's important because the space is available, and it's gonna. My clients and the public will enjoy it. Despite what you may think, the idea of what's going to happen out there in the time of Instagram and Facebook, in the 15-second holy cow, what I do is very compelling, and it like some of my athletes said, it's very beautiful and graceful. The image that you may have of Olympic weightlifting being slow, plodding, big, strong men is an antiquated image. We're some of the greatest athletes on the planet. So what you're going to see out there, but to be clear, the inside space, I think it's A, that's the Olympic weightlifting component. The rest of the facility is going to be for general strength and conditioning and fitness for the general public, you people and everybody else in the area that wants to come and be a part of this program. So the Olympic weightlifting itself is inside, and to speak to your comment, the windows are not going to be obstructed for the same reason. I want people to see what we're doing. It will draw foot traffic, it will draw spectators. It's a very compelling, exciting sport. So does that answer your question? In terms of the rack, again, I don't think it's as obstructive. It's a lot less obstructive than the play structure over here in the park by up tenfold at least, and safer for the public in terms of vandalism. It's not in a darkly lit area where at night people could, it's in an area right in the downtown area. It's safer than, there's not going to be any moving parts to it. It's a solid piece of equipment. Nothing can be removed. So I hope that, does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, I really would hate to throw the baby out with the bathwater over something like this. It just seems that there could be another solution to this, you know, make it a more passive activity. I understand that weightlifting is a beautiful thing, or can be something very nice to watch. But it is a different function than people sitting and enjoying a meal, and there is noise and big pieces of equipment dropping loudly, and it just seems that a similar function to what was approved before might be, for me, more acceptable.
So you know, the equipment that we use is designed to be quiet. It's rubber, and when we drop it, and Brad, the owner, was nice enough to pour an extra inch of concrete on the slab when I signed the lease, because he knew that there might be an issue. We're also installing soundproofing in the walls for the surrounding tenants. Again, the idea that this imagery, I think if you really think about what's going to be going on out there, it's something, I mean, this is the town where mountain biking was invented. This is a fitness-oriented town. I see people in similar facilities in San Anselmo. You see people outside running in front of TJ's gym or Ross Valley CrossFit or whatnot. You see people outdoors exercising. In fact, Marin County is notorious for that. You have to share the road for bicyclists. You have to get out of the way for runners. Why is an Olympic weightlifting facility or something like this, just because it's a little less accessible or you don't have as much history around it, it fits perfectly with Fairfax and Marin County as far as I'm concerned. And I'm a resident. I was raised in Fairfax. And you know, from a vested interest, obviously this is my passion, but as a resident, this is something that anybody could benefit from, anyone.
Okay. I have a question for staff. I just need some clarification on the permitted uses and structures of the CC zone. I don't know if this is.
Well, we're going to.
That's for your later discussion
part
item.
of our discussion items later on.
Right. No, I understand. But I'm wondering if activities are permitted outside of the building. The question is for staff.
That's part of his use permit. That's part of what he's asking for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, is
All
to
right.
do that outside the
Okay.
building.
All right, great. Thank you.
Well, and earlier we approved a restaurant outside of a building, which is akin to an activity outside of a building to me. Okay, any other, yes, Shelley?
So when I was looking at this and seeing it as somewhat of a unique, and thinking about the outside thing, I was reckoning back to our last meeting when we were looking at just the architect and what makes this town interesting and have character. And I'd used the word kind of the texture of the town. And that's something that I was thinking about with this. The thing that I enjoy about being downtown is the kind of varied texture of the architecture and what's going on downtown. We have art, an art gallery and restaurants and a haircutting place and a dance place. It's just got a lot of different things going on. So in my mind, this felt like another one of those interesting, maybe not totally normal thing to have in a downtown, but I could see myself stopping and kind of watching something different and unique that you wouldn't normally see in any other place or in other towns. And I thought that was kind of cool. It's kind of the same way. It's kind of the same way I find myself kind of peeking in the dance studios and, looking in the art galleries and things like that. So I thought that, I just kind of thought that would be another adding to the interesting, unique texture of our town. So I think I'm looking forward to it. I do think it's, it's going to be interesting and different, but heck, that's kind of what we do here a lot. So I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, sounds like we can entertain a motion unless there's more comments.
Well, I just wanted to lend my wholehearted support to the project, and I appreciated the letters, I appreciated the photos, I appreciated the education and all of the support that you all have brought here, and I like what Commissioner Hamilton said as well, that this is I think it's a perfect fit within Fairfax. And I'll certainly point out that I actually had, for a brief period, had a membership in the Fairfax gym when it existed over there, and both the Fairfax gym and the women's gym have been in Fairfax during the time I've been here, and have been visible from the outside, and I never thought twice about the fact that that fit into Fairfax. So works for me. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we can entertain a motion from the Planning Commission.
I move that we approve application 0239 at 31 Bolinas Road, Suites A and B, to operate a fitness facility with a retail component, including an outdoor workout area.
Second.
You know what, I did forget to close the public comment period, so we're closing the public comment period. We have a motion and we have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Well, it looks like you're going to have your fitness facility.
Thank you all very, very much. I really appreciate your time and for hearing this. It's going to be great. I hope to see all of you in there. And keep an eye on these youngsters. This is my team right here. All these kids are going to be making waves in this sport. And they're all big consumers of calories. So any restaurants in town are going to be doing really well.
Maybe all the way to the Olympics. There is an appeal period of 10 days, and there's a charge of $500 for the appeal to the town council. Thank you very much. And Yasha, we'll all have to get to know you a bit.
I'm here.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to public hearing item number 4, which is 31 Bolinas Road.
I'll wait for just a moment if you don't mind.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
So staff report on 31 Bolinas Avenue, the other half. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Okay, so now we're moving on to the more global issues with 31 Bolinas, and this is a request for modification to your previously approved use permit and design review to make minor exterior changes to the approved plans and amend the permitted use categories for the existing mixed use of the property. If you recall, back in May, you approved the use permit for the mixed uses. Let me back up further. The intense use of this property really began in prior to 2002 with Wildwood Natural Foods. And then that morphed into Lydia's Loving Raw Foods. And then in 2012, the commission was asked to provide for restaurant space and outdoor seating, which was granted, and that's where the outdoor seating area that we just discussed came from. And then most currently on May 21st of this year, you modified the use permit for the building to allow the expansion or the formalization of what had been what we call mission creep, a lot of growth on the site that wasn't necessarily permitted building. There was a large overhang in the northeast corner that had been used for informal living area that you formalized into live workspace. The applicant is now asking for a use permit modification to allow a more broad type of uses in spaces A through E. Also, design review approval for minor exterior modifications. So therefore, the project requires a use permit modification. And because we so closely monitored the traffic situation in the last round in May, we asked the applicant to provide an analysis of the traffic impacts from the requested modifications to the range of uses. And then lastly, the design review modifications, which are on a succinct list of items. I might start with those actually. A door and window in the north elevation in the old live workspace, additional 2 windows in the northeast elevation on that same corner of the building, a window in the south elevation near the sidewalk, sort of between the outdoor seating area and the building.
Excuse me, Jim. When
Yes.
you say, would you give us the letter of the space that you're referring to?
Yes.
Thank you.
I understand. The first 2 are in space D. That's what was the live workspace, the northeast corner. Yes, on the face towards Mono Lane, that's the door and window on the north elevation on the next page, I believe it's shown. And then going around the corner on the old live workspace, an additional 2 windows, and that's on the east elevation, which is sheet, the 4th sheet in your plans. Then there was a window added upstairs on the east elevation also, and that window actually went in when they thought they were going to have a secondary exit from the upstairs apartment, which the fire department let them handle another way, but the window was already put in by that time. Yes, or the upstairs apartment window. And then along the entrance on the right side off the public sidewalk, the fire department dictated more or less that the backflow preventer should be as close to the public sidewalk as possible. And we considered asking the applicant to screen the backflow preventer, but after a little discussion in-house, sort of in line with Commissioner Hamilton's thoughts, we kind of thought it was kind of an eclectic piece of hardware that kind of was neat. So you might take that in. It is, by the way, it is always a conundrum with these extra pieces of equipment now that get demanded by outside agencies, and they're sort of after the fact with screening and parts of the design. You see them all over now. And then lastly, the relocation of the electric service panels, and actually I might add that those have grown significantly, another requirement from PG&E. And lastly, the gas meter. And then, and then on the roof, there's an addition of 26 skylights, which just made it through fire approval. It's a good thing because they're already in. They are good for natural day lighting. I might add that there's a series of these round skylights you see from the street also. Those are not articulated on your plan, and that's a little bit different beast. It doesn't sort of, in the building world, doesn't quite rise to the level of a legitimate, skylight. I actually know the professor when I was in grad school that was working on that to try to find something that goes in under the radar without permits, but they're good things. So those are the exterior modifications that we support. And we think that they're in keeping with the design review approval that you had in May, with the caveat of the backflow preventer. And one other little thing came up as Mr. Devine and I were going back and forth working out the details, preparing for tonight, and that is as you're walking sort of from, let's say, the coffee roasters back towards Town Hall, and you look up across Mono Alley, there's a series, I think 4 new air conditioning units that are up there. And they're conveniently I mean, they're right front and center in people's view from the street there, but they're between a wall that sort of pops up a little higher in the front part of the building in the front, and then the back part is, the wall goes up to the second floor living space. So it'd be very easy to just put a lattice screen wall very low to the height of those air conditioning units to create a visual screen. It'd be very easy, I think, structurally and cost-wise. And we had an informal discussion about it. I believe Mr. Devine, the architect, was going to talk to the owner, Brad, who's here tonight also, and in the staff report I mentioned you might want to just confirm that that screening is going to happen. And if you don't mind giving us the wherewithal, we can approve that just in-house.
Jim, is that shown on page A3? Would that be above the new windows and door on the mono side?
It's on the west elevation. You're not seeing actually 29 Bolinas in that elevation. It's on the left.
To the left of that.
Yeah, to the left, going back towards the higher line you can see, which is the upstairs unit.
Okay.
It's really just from one angle, but it's very, very apparent from that one angle.
And could you clarify once again what these humongous containers are all around the building?
Well, the humongous containers in the back are going away.
Both of them?
Both of them.
And what were they?
You'll have to ask the applicant. I think they came around the time of Lydia's Kitchen for, there's a lot of storage, eclectic storage space like that, both under, freestanding, informal, outdoor sort of covered areas.
What about the large container on the mono side?
That's actually staying. You can ask the applicant about that.
Okay, and then one last question for you. Tenant space D was...
B or D?
D is in dog.
Thank you.
Was that not to be a live workspace before? Was that just a commercial tenant space before, and now they're proposing live work?
No, that's you approved live work only in May. Okay, and back then we were under the assumption that the space that you just approved for weightlifting would be restaurant space also. I'm going to get into that in just a second, actually. And one other thing about the outside container you mentioned, you've revisited that issue in May, frankly. The two in the very back are going away, and I believe you allowed that one to stay. And it's on a concrete pad, so it's really not, in our mind, a subject of tonight's discussion. There's no request for changing it. There's no request about it other than what you already approved back in May. So backing up in the staff report for a moment. The main impact we were worried about with the applicant wanting more flexibility was the changing of the use of the live workspace, which you had stipulated in your approval in May that if he wants to come back in with some other use for that space, then he may be subject to a traffic impact permit, or at least he has to demonstrate per the code why he isn't. So when we informed the applicant of that, he hired W-Trans, and they did a thorough investigation of the historic use under Wildwoods and Lydia. And again, the permitted uses under both Wildwood and Lydia were sort of conditioned similarly, and they grew in operations and size. So they modeled what they thought was the real existing use under the prior Wildwoods and Lydia kitchen. And given that assumption, they came up with the table that's in the attachment from W-Trans, the report and the table. And Mr. Devine and the applicant can speak to this in more detail if necessary. But what their analysis showed was, with the uses that are now proposed, and basically the main change is in the back, in the live work space, rather than just live work. He would like the flexibility to have either light industrial, retail, personal service, or exercise, as well as live work. And there is some talk of Yoga Mountain going in that back space. So again, our main concern was the traffic impact and not blowing the model. And we sent W-Trans's analysis to David Parisi for peer review, and he concurred with the analysis based on the assumptions. What we didn't revisit was parking, and I actually was just trying to pull up my staff report from May, because I believe, if memory serves me correct, that they just hit, in fact, they may have had one extra space on the parking lot for the mixed uses at that time. But the reason that we weren't concerned at this stage with parking impacts is that, at least under the prior analysis, it parked out. There is what there is in terms of the number of parking spaces on site. We're trying to build in flexibility for the owner, so as tenants turn over, he has more latitude. And he is in the fortuitous position of providing some of the only on-site, off-street parking in the historic commercial core of town. So other businesses and property owners that come in for changes of uses, like he has up until this point, have to meet the parking or get a variance. And usually the variances are granted because there's no physical place for the parking. In this case, he's providing much more than any other uses normally in the downtown, any that I know of for that matter. And it parked well before, and the intent is to give him latitude for different uses. Again, he's providing more off-street parking. It met the requirements last time, and building in this flexibility, given the parking analysis, we were good to go with where it was. The other thing I would point out is that right across the street is the Mono Alley parking lot, which is fortuitous for this location. And as you all know, the Mono Alley parking lot morphs into the LC Bank street parking, as well as the Parkade parking, which has been redone and is more appealing to use now also. So with that, let me just check my notes here for a second. We did get a letter in that the owner provided, that was a letter of support from immediate neighbor. I'm not sure where it just took off. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me. I beg your pardon. Thank you. I am neighbor at 47 Bolinas, which is in the south of the parking lot next to 31 Bolinas Road. Unfortunately, I cannot be at tonight's meeting in person. However, I would like to voice my support for the improvements underway next to me. I am in favor of Yasha's opening a gym and previously support the outdoor patio's use as a workout space. I would also like to support Sienna's Yoga Mountain, and yada yada. But it's a letter of support from an immediate neighbor. So with that, any questions?
So I think I agree with the changes that are proposed. They look okay to me. I'm really happy to see the front door going in. That's I think I've spoken about that at previous planning commission meeting, that I was kind of a missing feature of this building. This is something I'd like to bring up that it might be, I don't know how this fits with the fact that this isn't one of the rooms that's being talked about in this application tonight, but especially as I think about Yasha's operation being there, I look at the men's restroom there. There's separate men's and women's restrooms, which there aren't that many of them in town, and so this is one place where there are separate ones. I would strongly suggest that there be a urinal added if there's room, which it looks from the plan like there might be, to the men's restroom. That would save a significant amount of water over the years, and especially a waterless would be the best. Also the easiest to put in because you don't have to run water plumbing to it. But it would also improve just in a situation where, let's say, in the gym, there were a number of people who were doing a class or something, and at the end of the class, they all wanted to go use the restroom, then the urinal would be double the capacity. So I would really suggest that. I don't know whether we can add that as a condition at this point because of the fact that this is not really, tonight's application is primarily about exterior changes, but this occurs to me at this point.
An interesting point, and I would just say you might want to discuss it when the applicant's architect or he's up, because I believe that all the infrastructure's been put in for the bathrooms already, but you can revisit that.
Okay, my comment on this initially is that there's a request for retail, personal service, exercise, and/or live work, and live work has been approved. I don't find, I've been focusing on 17-100-040, the CC zone, and you know that I've done a kind of redraft of it. I don't see anything in there that would hint at light industrial, and I realize that's been a historical use, but frankly, that's the one element in this request that I don't feel comfortable with, is the light industrial.
In the space D.
Yes. I mean, the reason being it might eliminate parking. You can have massive trucks coming and going while you have 19 parking spaces, et cetera. There's a lot of reasons why that shouldn't be included, I think, in this definition. Any other comments?
I'm just wanting to understand your comment. C is listed here as also requested for light industrial. Is that a concern for you as well, or
wherever light industrial is requested for this project, I think it would be a mistake to approve that.
So I'm not sure whether you actually approved. I believe you may have approved light industrial in space C in May, but we can ask the applicant if that's different. I think you already approved it for C, but it's definitely new in D.
Mr. Moore, if there were a light industrial use proposed in the future, there is not one at this time, would that not require another review of the traffic study, because the uses could include deliveries or trucks or perhaps additional parking requirements?
So I believe in W-Trans's letter, they tried to sort of address, and the architect might be able to do a better job than I on this, but I believe in W-Trans's letter, they took the most heavy impacts and then tried to blanket the analysis, and you can speak to that. He can speak to that when Fred can speak to that.
Okay, any more questions for staff at this point? If not, then the applicant may come forward, and let's we've already had some discussion on this, so please.
I'm Fred Devine. I'm the architect. Thank you, Jim. Good report. I need to start with how I picture this. This application started primarily about trying to increase the use classification for the live-work space. That was first. And then it became clear that a number of modifications became necessary during the start of construction that really, because of the way the rules are written, should have been modifications. So that's the list that Jim went over. And then the use change, as Jim suggested, the live work definitely worked and avoided the town's traffic study requirement, whereas it wasn't clear whether this change would or would not, because actually in previous things, the numbers had come from somewhere, but no professional had actually done a study. And a small quibble, in the report it says letter, Jim has said report. This is, W-Trans did a $3,000 report. This isn't just somebody, wrote a note out. They spent some time on it. I talked to them on several occasions, and it was run by your peer review person. The application was initially started because Brad, the owner, found that live-work wasn't really flexible enough, even though we had agreed to it before. It was in the previous application. Flexible enough for what he thought needed to happen. And so that's why it's before you. If I can answer questions about the traffic study, it's very carefully done. As Jim said, it's based on the previous uses, which is Lydia's and Wildwood, which is the way the ordinance is written, and then it's written looking at the ordinance to see, does it stay under the thresholds that are set by that ordinance. There aren't specific guidelines for each use, but the Daleen Whitlock at W-Trans is very experienced, and she knew how to fit what was here, took a not as aggressive a position about, well, what was the restaurant before? Could we use a higher number to get the number even higher? We stepped it down to what you see she presented here to take and establish a baseline for what the property was, then built in, and you'll see that the restaurant and the outdoor patio that are built in are at higher levels than that, because that's what the smaller restaurant and the patio would in fact be. A huge number of trips would be if the patio was seating for a restaurant. We're trying to create, which backing up to the big picture, something that does not have to come back every time and be restudied every time, but uses fit within the approval. And so we asked that it establish also, well, where is that point? And what you can see, maybe you can't, but it's in there, is that it's the general category of specialty retail includes personal service. It's what would normally be in a small retail strip center. A downtown like Fairfax's is like a strip center. There's those kind of uses, a restaurant, the hair people, small retail. And it's that kind of model, and trying to see if that would work in each of the spaces. The light industrial, Brad has indicated to me he'd love to keep it. I understand your comments. It would have less trips. Somebody asked that. No question, it would have even less trips, so there wouldn't be a problem of coming back about trips. But if you felt the use wasn't compatible, but the specialty retail includes the personal service, the exercise, and including retail stores. And the way it works right now is, if for some reason Yasha wasn't there anymore, although it sounds like he's going to be there, I was surprised too, and a restaurant would figure with this definition. In other words, it wouldn't have to come back and say, oh my gosh, now we went and approved this and we got to start all over again. We're trying to get it globally included, and that was the reason for paying for the traffic study, to get a professional opinion. So that sets that part. I sort of did it reverse from the other. The others are sort of cleanup items that, yes, the electric meters had to move because the fire riser had to move. The fire riser had to move where the electric meters were, so they had to move back. And that was, I think, not the fire department. I think it's MMWD, but it almost doesn't matter. It's MMWD insists on that backflow preventer being as close to the public right-of-way as possible. And two options that we've done on others is leave it, and it's an element. Frank Lloyd Wright used to say, if you see something like that, paint it red and say you did it on purpose. My suggestion would be either leave it the same or paint it out to match the building, because you can paint out all but the little identification parts, and it will, quite frankly, disappear. The meters have gotten bigger than what was assumed, because it was assumed it could be done a certain way, and PG&E standards were different. The windows are just things that, for one, in the live workspace, that needed to change once we were applying for a different use. The skylights are something that Brad wanted to do. They met Title 24, and they met the fire department requirements. So it was kind of like owner choice. And Jim already said the one window was added to the apartment because it was needed for an escape, but then it wasn't later and it was already in. But I don't think it negatively affects anything with regards to screening of the units. Jim is right. We discussed it. I don't know whether you've seen it. I walk downtown Fairfax all the time because I walk almost every day. And I had never noticed it until he called it to my attention. Once he called it to my attention, yes, absolutely, I could see it. Because for some reason, I'm focused down the street. Now, if I'm driving, I wouldn't be looking up there at all. It's not like the screening that was necessary at Good Earth. Everybody sees Good Earth because you can't avoid it. You're stuck in traffic. You're looking at the roof. It's something that you have to look at, and I don't think you're going to see it driving. And you're not really going to see it walking unless you look up there. But there's no question it's there. Brad feels that it's not that offensive. I'm here to present that to you. It's also true that a little bit of lattice wouldn't be that difficult, and it would make it even less noticeable. The units could also be painted a different color. They're white, so they really stand out. So I guess I leave that to your questions or comments. And I think that's it. If I've missed something, please ask a question.
Can I just add one point? When you mentioned, Fred, that there's the flexibility built in to where a restaurant can come back in, I just want to articulate that the uses are laid out on page A2.1. And if you notice, the restaurant under the parking or under the traffic scenario that was legitimated, if you will, by W-Trans, it's space A and B and the outdoor sitting, exactly what Yash is in now, that can accommodate the restaurant.
And let me add another comment too, that is the approved use. That's kind of the limit. An example of what doesn't fit is if the live workspace wanted to become a coffee shop, that doesn't work. And we can put that on the record because that's what we did. We looked at what is the highest and best use potentially. It's a restaurant at the front, but that's where the traffic works, and it's been built out, and it's not used in this scheme. But if A, B, and the patio were used as a restaurant like is described, it would still work. But you can't go and turn, for example, the one space on the street is to be a hair salon. That can't become a coffee shop if the other is going to be a restaurant. It just doesn't work. So that now there is a documented record. Thank you. Unless there's questions.
Okay, well, why light industrial in space D?
Light industrial.
And how would you define that? Because we don't have a definition in our town code.
Brad can speak to why he would like to keep it. I would just say it's there because that's sort of what the use was way back when Wildwood, they were kind of using it in a light industrial way in the back, but Brad can speak to that.
Hi, I'm the property owner, Brad, and how's that? Okay. The back space doesn't really have a retail presence. It's really buried back. You can't see it from anywhere. And I thought, some uses for it might be somebody wants to have a small bakery, wholesale bakery, or a small food processing place that like Lydia had at some point. When Lydia came to my space, she had 8 little dehydrators that were this big. And when she left, she had a dozen dehydrators that were this big. And it just seems like, that kind of use would be appropriate still back there because it doesn't really have, it's going to be hard to get, unless somebody has a destination, like Yoga Mountain is a destination, other types of light manufacturing that not noisy, not polluting kind of things might be good for the back space in the future.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. Any other questions of commissioners for the owner or architect?
I had a question. I don't know if it's for the owner, architect, or staff. In terms of light industrial for those activities, that makes sense. You're right, it is in the back of the building. I do agree, though, that light industrial is often more associated with delivery issues, and I do remember that in a prior round on this building, there were issues with hours of delivery and backup beeping with the residents nearby, that it is adjacent to residential uses, and so there was some issues, and there's maybe different turning radius issues with trucks and things like that. Is there any way of saying yes to light industrial and no to delivery trucks or something like that? Because that's I totally get, I could see that back there, but those were issues, so.
May I address that a little bit? Having lived at the property, I'm pretty familiar with the trucks that come and go all through the day and night. There is a lot of deliveries that happen in the morning, especially down Mono Avenue, and big trucks that park out on Bolinas from 4 o'clock till 6 or 7. There's a lot of activity already on the street that I don't know this would be any different.
So actually, Linda may give us some historic perspective on conditioning. Oh, go ahead.
Just talk about the use permit. So even though you're expanding the types of uses, if any business that's operating under a use permit has an issue that starts creating a problem for the whole neighborhood, if we get complaints, we can schedule it for another hearing where the issue can be discussed and you can determine whether there's solutions, right, or whether the business needs to be modified. So, I mean, if it ever became a problem, you would have a way to address it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we need to have a definition for light industrial that we're going to use unless we modify this ordinance. My suggestion here would be a compromise position that says that there would be no light industrial without an additional use permit or review. For that very reason of trucks coming and going, and that is my concern with the light industrial. It's fine if someone wants to manufacture something there, but it's the deliveries and pickups and things like that that would interfere, I think, with the parking. And if Yasha has his way and he's successful, all 19 spaces may be used, and it might be quite difficult.
Well, and also I think since the space C already has light industrial allocated to it, we can use what Linda said if that becomes a problem. So it's not like there isn't any opportunity for baking and that sort of thing. And it's way within your right to condition to eliminate the light industrial on D if you so choose, or to stipulate it needs a review for use permit modification if it goes to light industrial.
Right, and I say that with trepidation because we shouldn't have applicants coming back for these hearings. But with this situation, and we have discussed it at length. I remember with the parking. And the idea was it was going to be a restaurant, the parking lot was going to be full. How were people going to turn around? How would a truck get in there and turn around? Or would it have to park on Mono or take up Bolinas Ave? So this is the issue.
And we are making progress because you conditioned it last time in May, and that's why we're back in terms of having this traffic analysis now.
Through the chair, I really, first of all, I appreciate the owner's investment, because I realize that you're not just putting in doors and windows, you're doing an incredible amount of work structurally to prevent flooding, your foundation work. I don't know that there's anyone in town that's made this type of investment in a property. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate staff's and the commission's flexibility in terms of, it's a crazy market out there, and you're trying to improve a property, and yet you don't necessarily have a tenant yet. So those things change, and from one year to the next, those things can change. So I'm very supportive of a general description that does allow various uses, which is the intent here, and I support. But I do have that concern about light industrial. If it were something that that does, a lot of light industrial could be fine, not a problem at all. The problem, though, is that once the business is in, and then you have a problem later on that they've got 10 trucks coming through for deliveries at 5 o'clock in the morning, there's very little you can do once the business is there. So, and I also understand and really appreciate the traffic analysis that was updated to include the highest use that was existing, and I realize that we're kind of under that threshold at this point. If there were just some way to clarify that light industrial, either not approving it in the current space C, it's already approved in the lower area, or it's approved in C but not yet in D, we could either withhold approval in D or just request that it come back for some level of review if it is a light industrial use that's more intensive in terms of traffic.
But you want it to come back before that use went in.
Ideally, yes.
And the easiest way is to eliminate.
For D.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess I generally concur with those comments, and I just would point out that it seems like the reason for the concern about the light industrial is really, as Chair Green said, we don't really have a definition of it, so it's really kind of hard to say what we're approving. And so it sounds to me like there's sort of a general hesitation to approve a class of uses that we don't have a definition of, when we can imagine with some vague idea of what that definition might mean that it could include uses that would have problems like delivery trucks or noise. We don't know whether they would, but we don't have a definition, so we don't know what we're approving. Anyway, I'm less concerned about that than I am about the urinal. I didn't hear about that yet. But, you know, we are going from having space D be specifically a residence, which would mean that the people there would be using their own facilities. And we're just, as we're opening up the possibilities for a lot of different uses there, we're probably getting a lot more traffic in those restrooms. And I just think it would be really appropriate. And my concern is water savings. It's an unbelievable amount of water over the course of the years to not have a urinal in there. And we might as well do it. So I'd like to ask about that.
My apologies, I meant to speak to it. I'm happy to look at it, but I do believe ADA is very unforgiving, and I don't believe we have the space to provide the clearances you're required to have to meet ADA and add a urinal at this point. I'm happy to look at it, but I don't think it works. I also know that unless it was a waterless urinal, all the underground is already in.
Everything's already in.
And
floors, painted, flooring, it's all. I'm sorry. It's all in already. The bathrooms are totally finished. Yeah. It would be a lot of it would be hardship to add a urinal at this point, even if we did have the room. But I don't think we do. It doesn't. There's not enough room in the bathroom.
I can appreciate that. There's small spaces. And one more question for you, which we cannot require, and I'm not sure what stage of construction you're at, but if there's any way that, obviously you can't redo the plumbing that's already in the walls and floors, but is there any option to capture rainwater or put solar into the rooftops at a later date? There is a new PACE program staff could tell you about that finances solar up front for commercial property owners. Or if you could at least take a look at, and like I said, we can't require any type of rainwater catchment. Now that you don't have the monster containers in the back, you could put a nice big water catchment barrel, one of those 600 gallon I don't know if it's possible. It shouldn't be horrendously expensive, and the savings to you in water that you could turn around and use to irrigate your property could be significant. If you could take a look at that, like I said, we can't require it. Right. And then, is there in the back area where the containers were, what will happen with that area?
Where the area, that's going to be leased to Four Paws, and they plan to use it kind of as a place for kids to come and kind of play with the kittens. They have a kitten rescue space there.
Oh, okay. So it'll be like a little garden space or something in the back, space. A little play area.
Yeah. And just to address the water issue, everything back there is already on drip. Has been for years. Solar, rather than put solar panels, I put skylights. Same effect. So we don't have there's no need for lights in the daytime. I'm not against putting solar panels up there. I would be happy to. Yeah. But there's not a lot of room left now that I put all the skylights in.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we can bring it to the public. Any member of the public have any comments on this project? Apparently, no members of the public have a comment, so we will close the public comment hearing period. And any discussion among us then?
I just would like, I guess, clarification or confirmation from staff. So what Mr. Sorry. What we're saying is that if we do not approve the light industrial in D, but somebody comes in later with something that is defined as light industrial, like a small bakery, they can come in and apply for a use permit.
Just like Yasha,
just like he did.
We didn't have a definition for personal service, so we erred on the side of coming back before you because the other exercise places on Bolinas had to go through the same routine.
Okay.
Okay. Well, shall we entertain a motion? If I might say, it seems like the motion would include a condition that there be no light industrial in Unit D. It doesn't mean there couldn't be any. It's just that we'd have to know what it is and have a hearing like this about it. If that's okay. Okay. Then I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll put a motion out there that we approve use permit modification application 0239 for 31 Bolinas Road, Suites A to E, excluding the light industrial use in space D. Not that we wouldn't approve it, but we just would need to know what it is and have it come back to us for an approval. And I believe...
Okay, any second?
I second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All against? None? Okay, it looks like you can... And thank you so much for beautifying that building, if I may say, and adding that door. It just was such a, iconic mess before, and now it's going to be an icon that's positive for us. So thank you very much.
And
also
Mr.
really
Chair,
love that door. Thank you.
and there is a 10-day appeal period.
And there is a 10-day appeal period, fee of $500, and that appeal would be before the town council. Thank you. We are moving on to discussion items, and I just thought these aren't numbered or in any particular order, but we do have some rather, you can stay all you like. We have some rather mundane ordinance discussions also to have. So if anybody is here...
Actually, Mr. Chair, I think you have the minutes to get through right now first. I apologize.
Okay, you're right. Okay.
You can put it off if you want.
Well, let's go ahead and do that then. My thought was to have folks who are here for the discussion items go ahead and present or whatever, and then.
I was going to chime in ahead of time if you'd let me just share with you my perspective on this exercise. But do you want to do the minutes after this, after the discussion items? Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea.
I think we can make that little amendment to the agenda without breaking any rules.
They don't need to hear us correct.
No, right.
And they can watch it on TV.
And let the record show that Commissioner Laura Caroline has just rejoined us. She had to step down because she's the architect on the last two items. She's with the firm on the last two items. Welcome back. So, okay, this is very unusual that we have this many items in the discussion list tonight, and it's also very unusual the type of items we have on the discussion list tonight. So there are 4 items basically, and the 5th being sort of the priorities list going back to the last attachment, which was what I gave to the town council during their budget deliberations, if you recall. Remember, we went through that exercise where we distilled the 6 most important things for this calendar year. So that's just sort of the housekeeping one of what you think you want staff to come back with first, and part of the discussion on the first 4 items will dovetail with may dovetail with your list. But the 4 items are, the workshop that was held, the Planning Commission workshop that was held on October 22nd to discuss the Wall property, and it was a public noticed workshop. And then there was the Town Council Forum, this is number 2, held October 29th, a week later, and that was on the converting the highway commercial to central commercial. And then the 3rd item is junior second units, and the 4th is short-term rentals, Airbnb. And so what I've done here, again, because this is unusual to have this many meaty items, and we're not holding a public hearing tonight, okay? But given the Planning Commission workshop you held on the Wall property and the Town Council Forum on the conversion of highway commercial to central commercial, it seemed like it was appropriate to agendize this tonight under discussion items, so you just had an opportunity to follow up with any thoughts you may have, having had those 2 events now a few days in the past. And the bullets I put under each of those is what I'm hoping that you as a body, after discussing among yourselves, might be able to offer us in terms of direction. And the first one is probably the more nebulous one, and in fact, Mr. Marshall Rothman has been kind enough to be here tonight. But basically the 2 bullets are any specific Planning Commission concerns about the development of the property and any specific direction for the property owner. And this is just in a sort of, we can't deliberate, we don't have a public hearing tonight, and while I would, take comments from the public, it's just a chance to touch base on it tonight, not to get in the woods. I'm hoping that in each of these, we can just briefly touch on them, you as a body, see if there's something that you can come together on for direction, and then we move on. We will be coming back, obviously, on the Wall property when there's a formal application. That's going to be a long journey because there's going to be an in-depth CEQA analysis that's performed, among other things, many other things. On the CH to CC, we attached the comments that happened at the council workshop, just to remind you of what was said in the public's, by the public at that event. And again, with the CH to CC, we're just saying, any recommendations, for example, on the preferred sizes of the units in the CC. Remember, we had quite an in-depth conversation, and staff was sort of thinking an average size might make sense in the upstairs units in the central commercial, and we're talking about sort of an average of 500 and a range of 700 to 300. And lastly, any specific recommendations for parking? That was the other salient issue in my mind that came out of the town council forum. And then moving on to junior second units, we provided you with the sort of crib sheet, if you will, from Lily Pad Homes. If you remember, it was Rachel Guinness who came and gave the presentation tonight to us on that, and she had put together sort of this model ordinance direction that she was kind enough to share with us. And then I also copied as an attachment, that's part of that attachment, B, the actual section out of our most recent 2015 housing element calling for the creation of the program. And it would be helpful to have you confirm a preferred maximum minimum size for junior second units also. And then the Airbnb thing, you've got an attachment with that, which are issues that were actually brought up at the town council meeting last week. Gosh, was that last week? 2 weeks ago. They asked that you review the issues and advise staff whether you think the town at this point in time should take any action on Airbnbs, short-term rentals. And I believe there might be some folks from the public here tonight on that specific issue. I might just throw out one little caveat on that. The 15 Scenic folks, you remember, that appealed the decision for the half bath on the cottage, and they were actually granted the appeal, but they offered to add teeth to the deed restriction that not only would it not be used as a standalone second unit, but it would not be used for short-term Airbnb rentals. So that was a bit of a negotiation that helped the council grant the appeal and also guard against unintended consequences with the back cottage. And then lastly, the last one is really just sort of housekeeping for what you see moving first, and I'll talk more when we get there. So starting with number 1 and the wall property, again, Mr. Rothman is here, and it's up to you, Mr. Chair, how you like to proceed, but I don't see us taking a lot of time tonight. These are going to come back, particularly, well, all of them will.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Regarding the wall property, I watched the hearing that you that you spoke at, and you know, overall, I think the idea that there is some denuded pads up the fire road, maybe those should be removed. This is just a thought, and people who want to meditate up there wouldn't be able to do so very well if there were houses next to the meditation area. So I wanted to address that idea. I don't know if we want to express, contentment with something. I mean, I think the idea of having a park in a huge part of the property is very compelling. Also, but the denuded pads, I don't know how they could be used if they're denuded.
So you may want to keep in mind that as commissioners, you're required to keep an open mind until the public hearing process is completed. You're not supposed to have any preconceived decisions in your mind about matters. So what we're looking for is direction. But on what you brought up, there has been a little bit of evolution since the wall property workshop. And I think some of you may have received an email from a member of the public lobbying to keep the current zoning. And we also sat down with Mr. Rothman to get his after the workshop thoughts. And you might want to hear from Mr. Rothman on that point, and perhaps someone from the public too. And then after you've heard from Mr. Rothman, members of the public, then just as normally bring it back to yourself and have the conversation.
Okay, well, why don't we do that? Mr. Rothman, maybe you could update us. You know what, if you still have a foot or back issue, if you can, if there's any way we can accommodate you.
I think I'll be fine. I've been sitting quite a lot. I'd like to actually stand for a moment.
Okay.
Thank you. It's nice to see you all again, by the way, and for the record, my name is Marshall Rothman. I'm the managing partner of the owners of the wall property. And thank you very much. I wanted to thank you at the time, but it was kind of crowded, for hosting that special session. We found it very informative and helpful. And in digesting some of the public comments and going back to revisit where we might go with the property, we went in and studied and are continuing to study whether or not we couldn't accomplish the beneficial aspects of a cluster development within the existing zoning. And while we're not complete in our investigations yet, it does look like that's possible, and that's the direction we're looking. One part of one of the studies that we proposed that night being the standalone rental units. And while we recognize that the recommendations in the general plan have a good motive, we, upon hearing the public and looking at it more closely ourselves, we came to the conclusion that in the interest of traffic and neighborhood character, this probably wasn't the appropriate place to have standalone rental units. And so we're probably not, and like I said, we haven't decided anything, but we don't see that being an aspect of any application that we make. We are right now investigating what mechanism we might use to ensure that the public has access and use of some of the property, which is an aspect that we are committed to and want to have as part of any application we make. And it does look like that's possible. We just have to go over the various scenarios and see which ones can be done and can't be done, and what the ramifications of those are. The property, I don't know if all of you have walked on it recently, but it is quite a large property, and I think there's room for everybody up there. I think we can do everything within reason, without too much density, and we can accomplish the public having use of it and the people living there at the same time without impacting each other adversely. It is necessary that we have some kind of return on the property. It did cost a lot of money, and it does cost a lot of money. And so those are all things that we're trying to balance. And as I said, we're in the process of studying that further now. I think that we're trying to make sure that what we come before you with next time in an application takes into consideration some of the things that were said, and they were, as I said, they were very helpful. Are there any questions that anyone has at this point?
Well, I want to thank you for that sentiment, that you've listened to the public comments and are taking those into consideration it's my comment is that I think if you're going to cluster and ultimately have public use, those are some basic ideas that we're certainly looking forward to following up with. We can all feel any members of the commission who want to make comments.
I was just wondering if you had followed up on the town's ridgeline ordinance, if you have had a chance to look at it and how that might impact.
We have looked at that in depth. And we've done actually gotten up there, and Mark Locke will be happy to know that we took them back down after we put them up and put some posts up so that we could stand back and across the way and see what we could see. The property is quite large, and it lends itself very well to, especially considering we're not going to be proposing that many homes up there, it lends itself very well to placement and screening, such that I don't think that we're going to be in violation of the ridgeline or in conflict with the ridgeline ordinance in any way. I think we can place homes up there, especially if we're going for one story and the sizes we're talking about, that will not be visible from anywhere in Fairfax.
That's good to hear. I was also concerned that you had not previously taken the ridgeline ordinance into consideration, and also there was the issue at the community meetings about landslides that have occurred. I'm sure you'll be looking into that, and just finally, I guess that it might be better to stick with the 10 units that are currently allowed rather than trying to bump that up, because I think you saw that could lead to some issues.
We've come to the same conclusions.
But I really appreciated the opportunity to have that session, that workshop with you, and thank you. We look forward to seeing what comes forward next.
Thank you very much. If there's no more questions, I'll sit. Oh.
I have another question, Mr.
Hi,
Rothman.
Mimi. How are you?
I was wondering if you had focused more on one of the recommendations by Mr. Hochstrasser to tighten up the clustering.
We did look at that in depth, and because of the lay of the land and because it goes up in elevation quite quickly and sits back, that option makes any development we did up there impossible to visually hide. It would be right in front, right in the public view. It would really have much greater impact. Not to mention the fact that the topography doesn't lend itself well to putting houses there, because now you're cutting into a hillside and you've got a lot more cut and fill, and you've got a lot more intrusion. You're not going to have single-story houses. It really makes much more sense to put them back and up where they're not visible and where we can accomplish a single-story house that is less intrusive, in fact, not intrusive. We ran around there for a few days putting poles up and running across the way and looking, and there's no way really to put it down near the entrance and have it invisible.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to know, are the poles still there?
No, we took them down immediately. I know that there's an ordinance against that, so we put them up,
All
took them
right.
right down.
Thank you.
We took a look.
I just have a process question in terms of what's next between the last conversation, this conversation, and an application. What do we see next? And are there other kind of iterations as we move closer, or is it just an application that would come before us?
At this point, it's undetermined what's next. It's always an option of the applicant to come forward when he's ready for the application. If you all wanted to have another working session, either independent of your normal meeting or entertain another, smaller workshop at a regular planning commission meeting that doesn't have a huge agenda, that's an option too. I know that Mr. Rothman has, in addition to coming in and speaking with us about his evolving ideas, he's continued to meet with the property owners, and he's fully aware that he'll have to come before the Open Space Committee again as his packet when his packet has been formed. He's already met with the Open Space Committee also.
We've discussed also possibly before we make a formal application, having another study session if you're willing to host such a session. We found that to be really a nice way to go about getting the public input without it being such a charged scenario.
And I don't want to.
I personally would appreciate another one. I felt like the dynamic and the conversation is a little less stressed than when people feel like, oh God, there's going to be a decision made tonight.
We felt the same. Yeah.
I would echo that.
And if I may chime in.
I'll second that too. I think that is a really good idea.
We felt that.
Because I think what's happening, as it should, up front are the big land use issues, the big land use decision with the groupings, right, and the splits. So one of the letters that you folks may or may not have gotten called for leaving the zoning upland residential 10, which is a minimum lot size of 10 acres. Well, I know, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that in fact is, the last I heard, possibly the direction that Mr. Rothman and the team might go, because it might be an easier path to keep the zoning what it is rather than changing it. So having another workshop when your ideas solidify further makes a lot of sense to me too, because it's the fruits coming out of the last workshop that then get to get tested again before the enormous investment starts to take place with the consultants.
I would agree with all of that too, and I think it would benefit to you and your partners to also get another small session in there before you do the formal application.
We recognize how easy it is to get off track when you get farther and farther away from a session like that, and you make decisions and you start moving things around. You miss things, and so it's much more helpful if we can, once we get something gelled, bring it back and see how much we missed. People have different perspectives, and the one thing that I've learned all these years is that I don't know that much. So I'd rather sit and hear people tell me what their concerns are.
Well, and certainly when some people voice their concerns that they did, as they did at the original workshop, and then you come back and discuss it again, they've had a chance to think it through. We've had a chance to look it through and consider those comments, and so I think another session would be a great idea.
The one thing I might mention is on the landslide issue. It was helpful. I was aware of one area, but there were a couple of areas that I wasn't aware of that people made me aware of, and we've been looking at making sure that we don't get near any of those areas or impact them adversely, and I think that that's going to be very possible. So, some of the concerns that we can't address are just the natural erosion that comes off the land if we don't do anything at all. But, it may very well be that, any engineer will tell you that especially with today's codes, that if you go in and engineer something, that it's much less likely to slide than if you just leave it alone. But we don't really want to develop in those areas anyway, so we're probably going to avoid them completely.
I want to find out if anyone else would like to make a comment too.
Oh, well, I was going to invite members of the public to make comments, but
I do have one question then, since I think we're in the question area right now. Either for either of you two, I'm not quite sure how, I don't really understand how you're seeing the maintenance of the upland residential 10 zoning with being consistent with clustering. I don't understand that, so maybe you could explain.
It may not be. It may not be, although clustering can be defined different ways. And I think that when Mr. Rothman comes back in the next round, a different perspective on clustering might be involved with that. I don't want to jump the gun on where you might be going on this. As I said at the beginning of the workshop, as I see it, and I also think that two of the most salient comments made at the workshop were Mimi's about the ridgeline and Mr. Hochstrasser about clustering down lower. I think those, and that to me was always kind of going to be where this thing came down to. And there's some really interesting wrinkles that have been brought up. To cluster down in the same form as the subdivision down lower is could possibly be much more visual. One of the women that participated in the workshop came up to me during the break between the two items and said, I live in those houses down there right below, and the hillside above me is totally unstable and is prone to sliding. So there's a geotechnical issue with that area as far as slides and the cost that might be involved with that. I've heard Mr. Rothman, on the other hand, say that that up on those pads, you would be, when he comes back in, I think you'll see, and he's been consistent, that those pads are attractive, and how one of the scenarios he presented captures those pads with the big lots. So if in fact you don't see a one-story house on one or more of those pads, that's going to be an interesting exercise for you all to consider as this evolves. And I think that discussion would be best for all parties concerned before the enormous amounts of money start to get spent on the engineering, civil, environmental. So we're focusing in on the issue, and it's still, to me, the clustering versus the ridge and how that can be met.
Understand also that, and we've discussed this, my partners and I have looked at this, in order to bring those pads back into a less visible and more natural state requires some revegetation. That can be and will be most likely a requirement of any construction that's up there. So that, if we're going to put a house on the pad there and set it way back so it's not visible, we're also going to want to put vegetation in and re-landscape. So those are ways to get rid of some of that impact that's already there.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I guess one of the significant issues that was discussed that I just want to emphasize to you from my perspective is the existing recreational use of the property by so many residents, both in Fairfax and Sleepy Hollow, San Anselmo. unincorporated areas around us, that the continued ability of the public to access the trails that they've historically used and or alternatives if they're if that's the way you choose to go is just really very important, I think, to the town.
Every plan that we're looking at includes that access. So I don't think that at this point that's a concern. We are committed to making sure that, as I said in the first hearing, is there for future generations to enjoy. And I don't think it's going to be, it's a big piece of property. I think we can do this.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Rothman.
Thank you.
If any members of the public have any comments on this project, the Wall property?
Okay. I was just wondering about Mr. Rothman's comment. It sounded like when building on a ridge line that he was talking about putting vegetation to cover so you wouldn't see it. I thought that's what I was hearing, but I'm really not sure. But that's, to me, that doesn't really satisfy not building on a ridge line. Because then we wouldn't even have that law, because anybody could put houses and trees in front of, bushes in front of things like that. But anyway, that I don't know how legal that is as far as not building on a ridge line, well, how that goes. Anyway.
Okay, thank you.
If I may take a quick stab at just responding to Jessica, I think that it would depend on the specific area of the parcels that were being developed, because if you look at Fairfax's ridgeline ordinance, I believe there's an exception if there's no other place to build on the property for building within the certain elevation associated with the ridgeline. You guys probably know this better than I do, but my vague recollection is that if on that particular piece of property you can't build anywhere else but with a certain within that prohibited distance, that you can, and in those circumstances I think you'd want to see some sort of mitigation of the effects of the structure that close to the ridgeline. So, the town ordinance is pretty specific about that, I think.
And also it's more nuanced than, I think what you're saying is more nuanced than just thou shalt not. And it's not only from our perspective do we have to pay attention to the ridgeline ordinance, we have to pay attention to the legalities of a town, of the ordinance in terms of potential impacts to a property owner. It's one thing for a town to adopt an ordinance, another thing for it to stand up in court. So we're making sure that as we move forward, that whatever the town imposes can be held up. Are you with me? That can survive a legal challenge. Thank you.
If I might, I can address one thing also. Might be a misunderstanding. The vegetation that I was talking about putting in was not by way of screening the homes. It was more to revegetate some of those areas that don't have any, that have been cut and eroded. I believe that when we get to that point, and as I said, we're not quite finished yet, but I believe that when we get to that point, we're going to be coming in with a design review package on every single house with story poles, and I think that we're going to be able to place them such that they will not be in conflict with the ridgeline, and you will not see them. I don't know if you've been up to there recently, but there's quite a lot of room where you can sit a house back, and it's not going to be the way the topography lends itself. You'd have to be on the moon to see some of these places, and certainly you'd have to be on top of Tam to see a lot of them. So I think we can do a pretty good job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Not sure if we're ready to move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 2 on the.
Actually, do you want to do who's here for the other discussion items? So
Okay,
we don't
let's
keep
do
people
that.
waiting?
I'm getting a request from commissioners to see who might be here to discuss the following issues. We have next we have the CH to CC zone, and then we have a parameters for the town code to allow junior second units. And if anybody's here for these, please let us know.
How about the Airbnb?
Okay.
Bingo.
And then we're going to talk about Airbnb and short-term rentals and zoning ordinance updates. So who's here for the Airbnb discussion? Okay, why don't we do that now? Thank you.
Okay, so if you look on your report here, this little crib sheet, I should say, on attachment C, these were the issues that were provided to the town council also in the town manager's report. And I just want to point out in the opening, it says, one option for the commission to consider is an incremental approach. The commission could decide to allow the rental of rooms in residences and not entire homes, and try it for 12 to 24 months test period. This will allow time for the town to monitor the situation to determine if it is a problem. In addition, should Senator McGuire's legislation, SB 593, regulating short-term vacation rental of residential units be approved, staff would be able to evaluate the impacts on various issues from that legislation. Then the first bullet proof here is, if allowed, what should be the process to approve short-term rentals, e.g. use permits, amend zoning code. Second bullet print, and there's a little bit of extra on there. I mean, there's annotations after these bullet points. Should only rooms with the owner living on the premises or the entire house unit be allowed to be rented out? Third bullet, would this impact the legalization and or use of second units? Should there be time limits on the number of rental days? How would staff enforce a prohibition or monitor compliance?
Okay, if I may say so, one of the things we were given in our packets this week was a magazine. I think it was City Planning Magazine, something like that. California City, I'm not sure, but there's an incredibly good article in there about Airbnb and that type of thing. And one thing that that came out to me. First of all, I've gone to Airbnb.com and done some search. There's approximately 300 Airbnbs being operated here in Fairfax at the moment. We don't even know, but you can get them. You can find out where they are. The second point I want to make, and let me just say, I don't think we want to regulate this too much. But the second point is there a transient occupancy tax being collected? Or how would that mechanism be set up? Because that's a big deal in this article I read, and I kind of agree with that.
I don't believe, because we have no mechanism to track them now, that we are getting TOT taxes. And can I back up a second? And Linda, I think you had something to offer in terms of how the code is currently structured, how you might be able to regulate under the current code?
Yeah, I believe there's already a mechanism in our code because all of your residential zones allow the Planning Commission to determine that a use that's not listed as permitted or as a conditional use is similar. And if you look at your RD 5.5-7, it allows boarding houses, which is similar to an Airbnb. Second units are listed in the RS6, which is similar to an Airbnb. So I think there's a mechanism in place now to have someone go through a process, but it would be just like a regular use permit unless you changed the process somehow.
And we could get a legal reading on that if that was the direction you wanted to go.
Well, as I say, there's approximately 300 of them operating here now being advertised on the Airbnb.com. So if you want to find out where those are, it's easy.
My first instinct is to go with do nothing immediately and wait and see how this shakes out. However, if we wanted to regulate, I would opt for something similar, like what Linda just proposed. It's something simple. However, I think we should collect transit occupancy taxes if it goes beyond 30 days, which is kind of a standard for collecting TOT. And then one thing I'm not clear about is, say I want to go to Europe for a month, and I get a friend who's looking for a place who wants to rent my house while I'm away, and while they may be looking for a spot, that's not considered Airbnb because I'm not advertising it on an Airbnb site, right?
That's a one-time, that's a sort of a one-off. That's like a house exchange.
So that's allowed. So the point is to not have it advertised on the internet as Airbnb. But I'm okay. I agree with less regulation.
Can I just say one thing about the TOT tax? Usually it's the shorter the term is what's getting taxed. It's like the one-night hotels. The what?
It's over 30 days, it's a residence. If it's under, then it's TOT.
Right. So I think this is a really complicated issue. In fact, of all these issues, I find it the hardest in my own mind to say what I think we ought to do, but to try to take some kind of a stab, and I'd like to hear the public's comments, so I think we may even be getting ahead of ourselves about giving our opinions here, but since we are, I'll give a little bit of mine. That it seems like there is, as Commissioner Fregoso said, there is definitely a big difference between someone renting out their house or exchanging their house with somebody on a one-time basis so that they can go travel or whatever. That should not be affected by anything we do. That's something where our family has thought we might do someday. We wouldn't need to advertise to do it, but we have a line of people who would like to do it. But if we did advertise, I don't think it should be under this kind of consideration. I think what we're looking at here is, I liken it a little bit to, for example, eBay. eBay, I think, sort of started out as a place where you could sell something that you had to sell, and that sounded like a good idea. But then it became a thing where hundreds and hundreds of people have a full-time business selling things repeatedly on eBay. And so it has kind of morphed from a thing where a person uses it once to sell one piece of stuff that they have in their garage, that they find a willing buyer for it, to something where someone gets a warehouse full of these things and then they sell them on eBay like a store. And then somehow it's like, what are the implications of it changing from this one-time thing into a long-term thing? And it seems a little bit like what has happened with Airbnb. I don't know what the people who invented that website had in mind, but it might have started out as short-term rentals of your own house. And now it's morphed into what seems to be the problem in San Francisco, for example, is that people actually just rent their house continuously through this thing, and they're basically circumventing the normal process of people renting a house and actually staying there. It becomes like a hotel. It's just all on the time. After one person leaves, the next person moves in, and it just stays that way. Therefore, the house is not on the housing market, and no person who is actually living in Fairfax gets to live in that house. It's all people who are transitioning through. I don't have anything against people transitioning through. I think it's great if people come and visit us in Fairfax, but if that becomes the dominant use of a whole lot of our housing stock, then it starts to really twist things. And that seems to me, that and of course the tax, that's an issue, but it seems like almost the primary issue really is the loss of sort of normal uses of housing, meaning either an owner-occupied housing or a long-term renter in the house. And the reason I like that is because those people, presumably you actually get to know them and you meet them downtown, and that's part of our community. they participate in the community. Maybe they even join the planning commission or something like that. Because they live here, they have an investment in being here, as opposed to someone who comes in for 2 weeks and leaves. They don't presumably have a whole lot of an investment here. So that, I'm just trying to define what I think is the issue, but I don't know what the solution is, and I think we ought to hear from the public.
Well, one more comment from me. My voice is I've had a cold and it's terrible. But the Airbnb, of course, is just a trademark for one type of business like this, and there are others like this, and they could multiply. So whatever regulations or non-regulation we put in place is going to affect all of this, of course, not just Airbnb.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I would, whatever we move forward with, I would like to see, as we have done for other ordinances, precedents, best practices from other communities. I'm sure there's tons out there. So whatever we move forward with, I think we should have some sort of analysis of what other people have done. I don't think we need to lead the way on this one. I think we could follow. So that was the first thing that came to mind, is what's worked in other communities and what hasn't. With respect to that, I believe that one of the precedents has been, to your point, I think the biggest issue is not to replace regular residency, but to augment on a one-off type of basis. So you want to allow for that one-off type of use, but have it not become a business, or replace a residence with a resident, replace a resident with transient occupancy all of the time. And I think one of the ways that that's done is having, under 30 days in a year. So if you want to go away for a month, fine, you're under the 30 days, or that allows for several long weekends in a year or something of either your house or your second unit. So there's something like that where you limit the number of days, therefore it's not really a business because you can't make enough money off of it. For the same reason, I would say, you had talked about residential having the owner occupied and a second unit. I would also hate to displace second units and see I can own a house and then rent, So that might be another thing to look at, is it might be better to have the main unit be the one that you rent out. So those are my thoughts.
I just wanted to echo what you just said, and also what I think it's on. Thank you. Yes. I just wanted to know if the town had received any complaints. Approximate, not very many.
I'd say they're increasing. A year ago we hadn't had any, but in the last year we've probably had 5, but we've only had 1 that has elevated to the level of actually filling out a formal complaint form and filing it with us.
Can I ask the nature of the complaint? Was it noise or?
Strangers in the neighborhood, parking.
Parking and strangers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Responding to Commissioner Hamilton's comment about best practices, this is a hot button item that's just like wildfire right now. So this is all in play. So there is a benefit to sort of sitting back and watching different types of municipalities deal with this in different ways. So, and then also not reinventing the wheel when we go to codify, if we go to codify something. And the third point is we have a heck of an agenda that's still in front of us with a lot to do for the next 8-10 months.
Well, I think there is a value in looking at what other communities are doing, but I don't think we should sit back and wait, because we had no complaints and now we have 1 formal complaint, and I think that's 100% more complaints. So we need to we need to do a fairly reasonably quick analysis.
So when we get to number 5, maybe as a body, you can tell us what you see as a time frame for coming back with this one.
But I think we have some members of the public here who may be concerned about this issue, so why don't we hear from them? please keep to 2 minutes if possible. Thank you.
I'll try. I'm Robert Short. This is my wife, Joanna. We've been doing Airbnb for 2.5 years. While you're deciding our fate on all the bad parts, there's some good parts. A whole lot of good benefit to the community. I'm going to chime in. I'm not going to read all this. Do you think I had it?
That's it.
You're welcome to submit anything you have in writing to us also.
Yeah, let's see. Well, try to do it quick. We were forced into early retirement by health issues, so we're trying to make ends meet when a neighbor suggested we look into Airbnb. So we had 2 rooms that are empty after our children had left home. We liked the idea of sharing our home and blessing travelers in need. It was a solution to our financial problem. At first, family members asked us, why would you have strangers in your home? We found that through the Airbnb vetting process, the caliber of guests made them friends as soon as we welcomed them to our home. We have met the most wonderful people, some from around the world. They've added an element of richness and understanding to our lives. Many have mentioned that they would not have been able to travel without the resource of Airbnb and the lodging prices. So we've made a binder of restaurants, stores, facilities here in Fairfax. Our guests are charmed by the small town flavor here, enjoy spending money in our town, so everyone benefits. 3 of our guests have actually come back to settle here permanently. We vet our guests carefully in consideration of our neighbors. The entire home sharing model is worth protecting as it encourages a global community through communication. When you welcome a guest into your home, sit down to eat with them, you form a deep connection and understanding. The income generated through Airbnb has enabled us to keep with the ongoing maintenance of our home and make minor needed improvements. Last year, we were able to travel to France and Italy, a dream we've wanted to do for many years. We're delighted with the Airbnb philosophy. Their business model is one of sharing. They're a generous, philanthropic company. In the event of a disaster, they waive their fee and use their contacts as a conduit to connect people in need with any who wish to open their homes to help. We and our immediate neighbors can regulate our situation with Airbnb just fine. With regard to people that rent out their homes and are not on site, that might be and disturb their neighbors, that could be a problem. Yeah, that would be a concern. But we're on site, and that makes a difference to good management. We'd like to work with the City of Fairfax, maybe more you than me, to keep this resource alive and functioning for the benefit of all involved. Thank you for your consideration and time, and let us know if we can help.
And I'd like to say something, please.
Yeah, speak up there.
One of you said less regulations rather than more, maybe 2 of you. And I would just say that this is our home. It's been a tremendous benefit to us and the people that come to our home. And when you say, well, it should be 30 days, it should be this and that, you say 30 days. My husband and I go up to Oregon to visit to help with the care of his parents, his mother, and somebody needed our home, and it was a couple from Britain, and they came and with their children and were in our home, and we were paid in essence to go up and caretake his mother up in Oregon. And so how can you say, well, oh, you can only do that for 30 days? Because the neighbors aren't complaining. It's benefiting everyone. If you put a noose around people's necks, I mean, how can you sit there and say it's got to be this way or that way? If there's a complaint, address it, absolutely. But more regulations isn't the answer. Not just random ones out of people's heads anyway. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask a question of these commenters? Yeah, I'm really intrigued by what you say, and I hear you, and I agree with it, basically. I hear what you're saying. I'd like to just ask a question, because as you heard a couple of us say here, the concern that to me is the one concern about Airbnb, and I have no other concern about it, really. I think it sounds like you know, I like the fact that people do all kinds of sharing. I like the wild, interesting world that we're living in. And,
Yeah,
and I like the
190
opportunities that the world
countries.
offers us today, and this is one of those opportunities. And by the way, I happen to really like having guests in our house, and we have quite a few of them, and it's enriched my life enormously. And I've stayed in some of their houses, the guests that we've had in our house over time. So I completely relate to what you're saying. The concern that I have is just the housing market here in Marin is so expensive that it's tweaking our whole way of life here. And that's, I don't know whether Airbnb really is contributing to that or not. That's the thing I'm trying to sort of fish out of this issue, is because that's what I thought the concern was in San Francisco when it came up on a ballot. That ballot didn't go that way, it didn't pass, but there was a concern, I think, in San Francisco about the Airbnb rentals being one more factor among many that led to there being such an enormous housing shortage in San Francisco that people weren't able to survive there. Now you're saying you are able to survive here and in fact have the kind of life that you need to have because of the fact that you can rent this out. So I guess I'd like to just ask a specific question. How do you compare renting out to people through Airbnb to renting out to someone on a more long-term basis? You know, would you find that you could charge more, or do you find, is that an issue, or do you find that it's just easier to find vetted people through Airbnb, or do you find that you just like to be able to, like you were saying, you rented out the place where you actually live at one point so you could travel? That certainly is an Airbnb kind of thing. That's where Airbnb shines, but...
Yeah, you answer that.
I'm assuming no one here has ever accessed Airbnb. And what they do is they vet people, and when they come to your house, you can accept them or not. They have a little bio. You can accept them in your home. And we vet them after Airbnb vets them. We don't want parties. We have a quiet lifestyle, and we are concerned about our neighbors. But the thing, I just lost my train, I'm sorry. We don't want to rent and rent and rent. We want people in our homes. We feed them a fabulous breakfast. Every once in a while, as I said, we go up to Oregon to help my husband's mother. I don't know what everybody else does, but I know enough about the sharing community that the Airbnb model is mostly you're on site. Mostly you're connecting with people. That's what the ideal is. And if you read their business model, there's 190 countries around the world that are hosting people. I mean, this has just grown so incredibly because it works, it's decent, it's wholesome.
Yeah, and trying to adjust the rental or long term. People say, why do you do it? You know, well, first of all, you know, you do it for the income. There's a financial part to it. And then they say, well, what's the second reason? It's because of the people. We enjoy the people, you know. And so our particular thing is not such a monetary thing, and we got to rent the house out, and we got to chase that dollar and you know, get as much as we can when we can. You know, I know some of that goes on in the city, and I also know that in the city there's a couple of old people that couldn't pay their taxes because they're so damn high in San Francisco without Airbnb. And when these laws that come down, it's going to shoot those older people that are retiring, and we've talked to them, and they said the only way we can stay in San Francisco is to do Airbnb. So you got the good and the bad. Now, yeah, the money makers, the guys that are scamming, that are going to disturb neighbors and cause this ruckus, I think is minimal way to the benefit, but that's just my throw.
The other thing is every time somebody comes to your home, you review them. And they review you. So if there's red flags, then you know what's going on, or they know what's going on. And if there is a red flag, you can call Airbnb and tell them, and they'll get them off the list. So it really is a great...
Our experience, 2.5 years, we hadn't had one bad experience. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, we're just lucky.
No.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for your interest. I really appreciate
Okay, thank you. Next comment?
Hi, I'm Doug Martin, 25-year resident of Fairfax. Thanks for bringing this issue up. I think this is a solution in pursuit of a problem in Fairfax. In other communities, such as Healdsburg or San Francisco, which are destinations, worldwide destinations, I mean, really have huge gravitas and draw people from all over the world. I can see how the intensity of utilization for Airbnb has become a problem, and there was need for some regulation. Fairfax is not Healdsburg. It's not San Francisco. It also doesn't, it has one hotel. From basically the sort of west end of San Rafael all the way to Lagunitas, there's very little place to rent for somebody who wants to come to town. We've made very limited use of Airbnb in our house, but we have. And the strange pattern that we see is people, it's parents and grandparents coming to visit their kids and their families. And they don't want to be, frankly, out on 101, driving in. They want to be in the town in which their kids live. The other little trend that we've seen is people who love Fairfax and want to come and live here, move here, because it's such a special place. They grew up here and now they want to come back and they want to be in here, live here, walk downtown. And those are the people who've made use of Airbnb. It is a different problem for different communities. In this community, it just doesn't, our experience is that it's just not a problem. One complaint, it's just not something that needs to be heavily regulated, if regulated at all, at this time. So we've had a good experience with it. Our neighbors have had a good experience with it. It's been limited, but there is a need for families to get together, and frankly, there's no place for them to stay, a very, very limited opportunity. You don't see hotel companies beating the door to Fairfax to whip up hotels so that people can come on a transient basis and just come and stay here. It's very limited, the number of people who come here, but we respect the intent and desire of people to come and enjoy our community. We're at times astonished by how much they love it here, how much they want to come back, and how much they want to spend time with their families. It's actually very touching for us, and we hope that you'll continue to leave that opportunity open to others who want to come back to our wonderful town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I might say that in my look at Airbnb online in Fairfax, the per night fees are like $118, $130, $120, and they go down to about $65 a night. So, you know, these are fairly hefty rates. They're almost like hotel rates, just for informational purposes. And again, my thought, and it's just a thought, is that we want to, if we don't want to regulate this too much because we're not quite sure how to yet, and Airbnb, yeah, you can take a look at its website. It does have a lot of stopgap items on it. But I think that we need to consider a TOT here and a mechanism for that if we're going to look the other way and have it happen.
I have a question.
Okay.
So is the only tax that would be applicable to this type of business operation the TOT?
Just thinking out loud in a business license. I haven't delved into it yet myself, so I can't adequately answer.
I mean, that's the same kind of tax that a hotel would pay.
Mimi, I think there might be a income tax after a certain amount, like after $10,000 or something like that, that applies.
Yes, we have another public comment. I guess we'll go ahead and listen. Thank you.
Well, we are not a hotel. We don't make the money the hotels make. We make a little more than, our fees are less than the hotels. We've had people that have come to a wedding and one of them have stayed at a hotel, just an average hotel for $169 or $200, and then the other person stayed with us and they got community, a great breakfast, and a clean place to stay. We don't make a lot. So in order to tax us, we pay something to Airbnb. We pay our quarterly taxes, income tax. We get that Airbnb sends that to the government. And to pay a tax like a hotel is really punitive. I just want you to know that. Thank you.
Well, I guess I have a follow-up question for you, though. I mean, don't you think that the town bears some, provides some services for the folks that are coming to stay at your place that would warrant a piece of the, we have businesses all over that pay taxes on the things they sell. I'm just curious as to why a business which is renting out a room in your house wouldn't be worthy of taxation to help defray the burden on the community.
Is there a burden on the community? I mean, this is our home. We're having guests in our home.
Well, we're generating business for the community.
Yes.
So
yes.
You want to
so
keep
we should
taxing.
Pay you maybe.
So we got to tax too. We're trying to keep the businesses employed. Food, Good Earth, laundry, movies, restaurants. They're all being used from customers in our house. And you want to tax us again with more regulation? Yeah. I'm sick. I don't want people getting their hands.
Listen, I think you have it a little off. It's not that you would pay the tax. You would be collecting a tax from your renters, and I believe that's the way it works, right? That's what hotels do. They charge a tax to people who stay over, and then you remit it to the town. It would not come from your pocket.
Well,
So Airbnb's got that covered. The federal, state taxes, they do our taxes for us. They got it covered. If we could leave it at that, it'd be great. I mean, I don't think we're really getting a burden here.
It's just trying to keep the prices down so we do have customers. That has something to do with it.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may offer suggestions if there's no other comments, to move on. I think this has been instrumental, and I think it's a little flavor of what's to come when you do revisit this for regulations.
Yes, absolutely. I think we do need, is anybody here on the commercial CH to CC zone? Okay, so should we move on to that?
Sure, and we'll revisit sort of the prioritization on the last one here too.
Listen, you Airbnb folks, we're talking about this and inviting you so that we can come to some decisions. It's not cast in stone. There's nothing decided. We just thank you for your comments. We appreciate it.
Okay, so moving on.
Is anybody here for junior second units? Okay, well, then, can I ask the one remaining person what issue you're here for? Or you can stay, if it's fine. Okay.
A citizen observer. There's a switch. That's wonderful.
That's how I started.
You got a gold star.
Right. You could.
She's a glutton for punishment, but she's a responsible citizen.
It's excellent of you to be interested. Thank you.
Now we're back to our normal audience. So, may I?
Yes.
Okay, on the CH to CC, I think it was a very helpful forum on it. And it sort of, in my mind's eye, having reviewed the list of comments, thank you, Michelle, for transcribing those. I think the size issue is one that I'd love to get some feedback on, and the parking requirements. And if you recall, what our latest thinking on staff is sort of the average of 500 square feet with a maximum of 700 and a minimum of 300. This is in the upstairs in the soon-to-be new CC section.
Through the chair, I like the range rather than specifying, and I think that 300 or 250 to 700 is fine. And in terms of parking, I'll go ahead and say we should keep our standard parking requirements unless the owner and tenant agree that the tenant would not have a car. Then I would consider a reduction of the parking requirement.
And can I chime in on that? Because I've been thinking about it a little bit. You know, when we get to the town center plan process and we start talking about parking and managing parking and using both public and private resources more efficiently, one thing that we'll be discussing is a parking assessment district, so that the antiquated storefronts in the historic part of town or the newly built out parts of the highway commercial after they've changed, if they don't have the physical wherewithal to provide the space, then they pay into a parking assessment district potentially, if it works, if we work this all out. So that if they can't do it on site, then they pay into the district, and the district improves the global parking opportunities.
I think that's a good idea, and we might even consider, heaven forbid, paying for parking.
So with those, again, what I'm looking for is a comfort level that you know, 4 out of 7 heads are nodding yes when you sort of give us direction.
Well, I think the 200 to 250 to 500 range is good.
I heard 250 to 7 with an average in between.
Well,
there.
I actually had written here 600 to 800 was my kind of initial take on it, sort of based on these, the discussion with the church property and the market properties. That 600 square feet seems to be about right. Not a big deal on the size. I was wondering though why you put in recommendations on parking requirements. I think you've already explained that.
Well, there's been hotly debated going back to the forums last summer when we talked about sort of the main approaches to the housing element strategy. One other little wrinkle in terms of the parking when we get into the woods on the town center plan is that we should look at shared parking analysis, because different types of uses require parking at different times of the day. But also on the, before we leave the point for a second, the magic on the average size with a maximum and minimum, it's performance oriented rather than prescriptive, if you know what I'm saying. So it allows variation, but it's got a goal of having a range, if you will, unless they just happen to be all smack on the 500 or 600 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think as far as the size, I don't have a sense for the numbers. The numbers we've been talking about sound good, but the idea here is that there is an existing building that is 1 story only, and maybe somebody would want to put a 2nd story on it. That's what we're talking about.
Well, if you were at the last workshop with the Fairfax Market.
I was not at that workshop.
It's a new building. It's a new building with a 6,000 square foot footprint, ground floor retail, except for one corner that would be a downstairs.
Oh, you're talking about, well, I was at that, but
Yeah.
But I thought this CHCCC meant we were talking about the zoning throughout the town.
Yes, forgive me. That's right.
Yeah.
Forgive me. It would be applying to the whole area.
So though, in that case, the size would seem like a lot of what would determine it would just be the actual shape of the existing building. I mean, what makes sense, in other words, in that building. It's not going to hang out over the edge, and it's not going to waste space by not using the space.
But you could divide the available airspace different ways.
You could divide it, yeah.
The bigger the unit, the less affordable it is.
Absolutely.
And the fewer units.
Yeah. So that I think would be the goal, however we met that goal, to try to keep with small units. And then as far as the parking, I completely agree with the comment that if there's any way, and I know this is always hard to do, but if there's any way to figure out how to get people in there that don't have cars, that's sort of the point, right? I mean, this is transit oriented, it's downtown, it's, you can walk anywhere in town, you can get to public transportation. We're moving into a world in which there's more and more options for transportation, and you know, not owning a car, I think, is the way of the future. And I really would hate to see us not build housing because of the lack of parking when this kind of housing is the solution to the car.
Your point is
choking
really
by a
well
car.
taken, and it speaks to sort of a philosophical change in the planning world that's been taking place over the last decade or two, and that is the whole concept of, instead of meeting demand, managing demand.
Right, and that actually, I echo that too. It follows the public comments. I mean, look at how many public comments in this long list. Plan for people, not cars. What generates traffic and parking, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of concern about traffic and parking, and of course, if you've driven out of here in the morning when the high school is in session, it's not, you know, at 8 o'clock, it's not fun. So that's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, and also I forgot to mention that you, Phil, provided us with a mock-up of how to perhaps change the language in the CC when we actually get to the point of bringing it back to you for converting highway commercial to central commercial with the accompanying language in the central commercial. So any comments on that was provided to us yesterday that came to you all today? I'm sorry it didn't get earlier.
Let me say what this is supposed to be. This is supposed to be exactly that, a mock-up. It's supposed to be a concept piece, if you will. So there's a comment at the bottom, and a few of us up here have talked about this, that I say excluded uses such as tattoo parlors that allow under 18. I mean, that's just the idea there is we can list excluded uses. We can have, you know, the L, B, the R, the different ranges of types of businesses rather than listing specific businesses, which leads to what we've had tonight. Some of this discussion we've had might make it easier for people to get permits, which is a kind of a goal overall. I don't mean to exclude tattoo parlors. It just came up this week. So, but then we would list L, R, B, whatever, and exclusions, and a few of those. And gas stations might be one, for example. You know, so that's the idea of this piece. So, yeah, any comments, please?
I didn't have a comment about this specifically. I wanted to add something to parking, but we already went on before I had a chance to make my comment. But anyway, yeah, I think it's the parking. I think is the hard thing with the units, because if we make smaller units, we're creating possibly the impact of adding more parking, and I'm not sure how. Is it possible that we can restrict tenants from having cars? I'm not sure how the town or an owner can do that. So that's one thing that is a problem that I'm not sure if there's a solution for or not. But I mean, parking is a real problem in the town now. There's certain times where I don't go into the town center at certain times, because I know there's not going to be parking. So it's something that we need to look at.
Okay. And regarding the restriction, I think someone mentioned that Whistle Stop is going to require the seniors to not own cars. I think it's something that can be done on the owner's side, but not the town side. And I'd have to talk with legal counsel, town attorney, about what role we could or could not play with conditioning a project on that. I don't know yet.
You could do what they did in London. They made driving and parking so onerous that a lot of people, including my extremely wealthy cousin, gave up their cars, and that's what happened there. And of course, they have excellent transport as well. So
sort of New York too.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And one thing that can be done, as was mentioned, we might eventually end up looking at paid parking. It doesn't even have to be paying a whole lot, but paying something means that you can't leave your car there forever. And, you know, that restricts someone who parks their car in downtown because they live downtown and takes up a parking space all the time, which would be really bad. Also, not allowing parking, as we do in some parts of town, like along Bolinas Road, we don't allow parking all night long. So, you know, all the cars disappear at 2 a.m., there's no cars there. Well, that would restrict someone who's going to use who's going to just park their car in this place all the time. They wouldn't be able to do that. They'd have to come up with another plan every night. So those are a couple approaches that might be thought about to, you know. But again, just in a general principle, I don't want to see us go in I mean, we're being choked by cars, and we're trying to figure out how to keep our community and have affordable housing. And those two things are, they shouldn't keep bumping into each other, and they keep bumping into each other in all the public comments. We always hear about how parking is so bad, therefore we shouldn't have any housing. And there's something, we're really missing something here. And I think 20 years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to say, you know, the whole car problem might have solved itself by us discovering that we can't keep burning gasoline, and also solved itself because we're developing other alternatives. And, you know, I just really think that we're at the peak of this crazy problem right now, and we shouldn't plan our long-term future on the basis of this idiotic parking problem that we're stuck with right now. Thanks.
I think it would be helpful to have before us summary of the current CC regulations for the majority of town, because I believe there is information in there about unit size. I think currently in the CC zone, I think there's something. There's certainly parking regulations right now, and I think there's size regulations in there right now.
What Phil presented had everything that's in there redacted, so it's in the redacted sections. But yeah,
the only thing Phil, unless I missed something, Phil just talked about permitted uses and structures. It wasn't land use.
I'm sorry, you didn't get the red line version.
No, I got his red line version, but it wasn't land use regulations. It was just permitted uses.
Then forgive me. Then it doesn't include.
He didn't get into all of the land use regulations around height and size of units and parking regulations and setbacks and all that.
This only tries to solve the problem of this idiotic list of businesses that we have.
I'm sorry. I didn't have a chance to fully digest this myself.
So that would be helpful just for people to know, because I think a lot of stuff that people are, when we get lots of comments, I think people don't realize that it's already allowed in the central commercial zone. So we're just kind of expanding it. And I think that it's helpful to do the CH to CC, because that way we can deal with the town as a whole. I mean, that was one of the intents, and I think it was even articulated in the general plan, was that we ought to treat our entire downtown as a whole fabric, not piecemeal it between these two areas, because we want the look and the feel and the intent to spread out in that way. And then with respect to the red line, residential was included and it was taken out, so we'd have to add that back in. And I went through and I had specific things, but I don't know if we want to get into the details of it.
We can also, visit with you all as we lead up to the actual ordinance.
Yep. Right. But I do completely 100% agree with creating categories of uses rather than specific uses, because some of them are pretty record, tape, and compact disc stores and things like that. So
I had a couple maybe philosophical questions that you guys don't have to answer right off the top of your heads, but just think about them. I appreciated the statement Laura was making that, with the smaller units, you create more parking issues. My initial reaction to the range of sizes was, why have a minimum? Why not let them be as small as possible? I don't know.
There's actually standards that, I think the lowest standard in health and safety is 150 square feet. And under the building code, I think it's 250.
Okay. And Okay. And then in the work that I do for money, we typically make decisions based on zoning. And I work at the Environmental Protection Agency, will have a different cleanup standard for a residentially zoned area than we will for an industrial zoned area or a commercial zoned area. And the decisions we make about how clean a property needs to be, pretty much are permanent even though zoning changes. You make a decision about something because of the state of the piece of property and at the time you're making the decision, and you kind of have confidence that the zoning is probably not going to change. But when you start putting residential units on top of commercial units, I have concerns about what that means in terms of cleanup standards at Fair Anselm. What were the assumptions that went into the decisions about who and for how long and what type of people were in the structures when those decisions were made, and how is that going to be impacted when we allow residential units in these areas again? So that's a significant concern to me. I think that's it for the moment.
Okay, I'm going to do something unusual. I'm going to ask, considering the lateness of the hour, and the amount of discussion I foresee on junior second units, and the zoning ordinance updates, that we could perhaps defer those to December and get on with our approval of the minutes.
So can I ask you, in terms of prioritization, that sounds great. It's just that we had intended to actually come back with the draft ordinance on junior second units at your December meeting. So.
Oh, we should have done that first then.
So we can do that and take a stab at it based on sort of our best shot.
Okay, I had a lot of thoughts. I had a lot of red ink on junior second unit on these pages with lily pad homes.
And that was just to offer up.
All right. Well, this is just throwing this out for discussion. I think that some of this proposed ordinance is fairly vague from sort of a legal viewpoint, and I would want to certainly have the opinion of the town attorney on some of this language. For example, complete independent living facility. Let's see here. Okay. Junior second units do not qualify as complete independent living facilities, given that the interior connection from the junior second unit to the main living area remains. I'm not quite sure what that says. Therefore, not redefining the single-family home, but rather building in the option to temporarily privatize bedrooms into a flexible housing unit. I mean, that sounds. There's a vagueness in this that needs to be correct. I'm not quite sure.
Can I save some time? Rachel offered this up. She was sort of taking an effort to create a model ordinance. You modeled the program and the housing element sort of on the Novato basis, and I have all that stuff from Novato. So if you would just sort of share your notes with me on Rachel's thing, I didn't intend to propose that as a model ordinance. I just wanted to show where she was going to sort of help communities that aren't even thinking about this yet. So if you're all comfortable with it, I would propose just let us take a stab at putting together a draft ordinance for you in December and see how well we can get through it. We have a couple of big items on December, which I'll get to in a minute, but that'd be my direction. And if we have to spend another session on it and we don't get through it in December, then we don't get through it.
Is it possible for the Planning Commission to appoint a subcommittee, even a subcommittee of just Phil, since he's already thought about it, to just be able to get a look at this and give you some feedback so that we save a cycle of coming to the meeting, editing it?
Yes, and ideally it would be an ad hoc subcommittee of 2.
Well, I could send you a red line of this proposal, but I guess it's not a good idea. Let me say this. We could it wouldn't be a bad idea between now and December if you could circulate to us the Novato ordinance, or point to it on the web, and we'll go get it. It's just there's a lot of things in this model ordinance here that I wouldn't want to have. I would want to have a legal opinion on before, it was used in any way.
So let me do this. I will forward you all what I have of the resolution and the ordinance. Remember, their ordinance looks a lot different than ours, so the actual codification of their changes will be different than our codifications. But I'll send it all to you.
Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to add a little bit of context that I think is also really important and helpful to think about, that in doing some research with the lily pad homes and talking to them, that a lot of the way in which you put together the ordinance has to do with those C, D, and E things in order to not trigger fire sprinklers, in order to not trigger sewer connection fees, in order to not trigger water connection fees. You have to structure them in certain ways. Hence, the connection to the rest of the house, because if you put a wall up, that triggers certain ingress and egress triggers with fire issues. So there are certain stipulations that we might want to say, well, why would we want to do that? Let's do it this way. But we need to know it as part of our decision-making process. So what I'm saying is, in coming back, really articulate it's being done this way in order to achieve this goal, so that we don't spend hours talking about something that is like, oh gosh, we can't do that because it will trigger a sewer connection fee or something like that.
Right.
So I think that's a really important element of the junior second unit, is to keep it affordable and easy and not trigger all of this other stuff, and that's one of the goals of it. So that's important.
Right, it's very difficult for us in an ordinance to say no agency will be allowed to require something. We can't do
that. Yeah,
it's odd. Yeah, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think you're saying is that the concept of junior second units is that this structure is already here and has already been used for this exact same purpose, a bedroom. Therefore, that's why it doesn't trigger a whole bunch of other things to say it could be used as a bedroom of somebody who isn't in your family. That's not a physical change. So, yeah.
So, I'm sorry, does that rule out somebody wanting to put an addition on that would constitute a junior second unit?
No, it says existing bedroom.
So
it's required to be an existing space.
An addition is a second unit, not a junior.
But if it had the characteristics of the junior unit,
you could do a new bedroom for yourself.
Well, a junior second unit.
My understanding is, if you wanted to remodel your house and say you're moving from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, you would be under the same regulations as a 3-bedroom house. And then
again, you're absolutely right that the concept of the junior second unit is using an underutilized, already existing space. If you're going to start going towards adding to an existing house, then you're triggering all the review. Has to go through the public process. That's not just an over-the-counter.
But, if you had somebody who was willing to undergo that process, it seems to me that there is a distinction between a full second unit with the kitchen and the junior second unit they're different beasts. So I don't know. I guess my just 2 cents is right off the top of my head that I don't know that you'd necessarily have to limit it if somebody was willing to go through the process.
So they're different. Yeah. So it's a whole different thing in terms of permitting it. Okay. What you're talking about is going through the process of creating an addition to the house, and then asking for the house to have a junior second unit.
Yeah, they can do that. Yeah. And part of it, in order to meet the RENA goals and have it be considered another unit as opposed to just another bedroom in the house, right?
What you're describing is a two-step process. You're asking for a permit to expand an existing house, and the expansion happens to be for a junior second unit, which is the next step of coming in and getting an over-the-counter permit to utilize allowed, already permitted space. Actually, the state said they won't let us stipulate that the type of unit that we're going to count in our arena is a junior second unit, but after the fact, when we've created junior second units, when we come back in 2022, they're saying they're going to let you count it.
They should, because again, like we were talking about with Airbnb, or like we think about with transportation, sharing of cars, things like that. There's the whole sharing economy is kind of the way things are philosophically, to use your word, moving. And so that's one of the things that's cool about junior second units, is that they have this concept of flexibility and families being able to be flexible over time, and housing stock being able to be used in a flexible way. So yeah, I support the general direction of them being able to be counted as housing if in fact they are housing.
I think we've got enough direction for that.
Okay.
We can put off the prioritization if you want. And I think that I would just point out that, we've got several things coming. You're going to have 3 ordinances potentially before you in December. You're going to have a modification to the emergency shelter ordinance so that the planning director's review of a management plan is not discretionary. So we're working on that now. You're going to have, depending on the outcome of a council discussion on December 2nd, we would notice the next day and bring to you a cultivation ordinance. The state just passed several laws regarding medical marijuana and cultivation, and have issued yet another edict that if local municipalities want to have their own take on regulating cultivation, you have to have them in place by March 31st. So stand by, that might be coming to you December 17th. And so junior second units, cultivation, and modification to the emergency shelter ordinance are going to presumably be on the docket in December. Airbnb wouldn't come back to you till after the beginning of the year. The CH to CC will probably come back in February, I'm guessing. And then sometime after that, we'll be doing the PDD rezoning, which gets us through the emergency, the CH to CC, and the PDD would get us back into compliance with the state on the adopted housing element.
I just, in the years of working on GPAC, and Shelby will particularly appreciate this, we came to the point where in order to really make progress that could be characterized as anything but glacial, we had to have, actually we ended up having more meetings, and I think the Planning Commission at that time started having an extra meeting every month for a period of time, because the main Planning Commission meeting was like we all know, mostly dominated by applications, and those always have to take priority. But in order to do these other kinds of things, and not have to do them at 11 o'clock at night, that was one thing that happened. But then another thing that happened, and I don't know whether the Planning Commission did it, but we certainly did it on GPAC, was we used subcommittees quite a bit. And where subcommittees came to be very useful is when you're actually writing something. Now in this case, we have staff doing most of the writing, and so this is a question, but I just really want to throw out the idea that if staff comes to us with this series of things that you're describing, each one of which is going to have tons of detail and require a lot of thought to get right, and if the town is expecting the Planning Commission to be the people who give it that thought, so that after it goes from us to the council, they can assume somebody's really thought this through and it's ready to approve, then, you know, I don't know about about us sitting here and doing this at 11 o'clock at night after a long night, meeting after meeting. And so, A, we're trusting you guys. Maybe you guys will get it so right that we really don't have to do anything. Or B, maybe we need to have subcommittees or another meeting or something so that we can just have the ability to give it that level of scrutiny. So I'm just wondering where we go.
Your point is well taken, and I think that it would be good to use the ad hoc subcommittee, single-purpose subcommittee, 2 persons. I also think that after the beginning of the year, maybe in January, we can talk about adding a second workshop meeting for ordinances in the latter winter and spring. And third, Bruce, there was another thing we implemented that finally got us off the glacial pace, and that was real-time editing at the meetings. So I will bring the computer, the screen, and the projector with the ordinance in Word form, so when you're going through them, we can do real-time edits and not have to go back, make the change, and come back and convince you that we made the changes that you wanted.
Yeah, that's a great idea, the real-time editing. That's really a good idea.
Real-time edits are a real benefit, but even with that, we, like on our Climate Action Committee, it took us 4 meetings to adopt a mission statement. It's just writing a paragraph in a committee is so painful.
That's what they refer to as decision by committee. Okay. I think we're there. Thank you all. That was a little bit longer than I thought, but it was a really good discussion. It helps us. Thank you.
Okay, so
is that your planning director's report?
It was basically to tell you what's coming, so yes.
okay, so having had the planning director's report, why don't we move on to approval of minutes? Does anybody have any comments on the minute? Now we have several sets of minutes here. So be careful. Those meetings you didn't attend, obviously you can't really comment on.
I have comments on both sets. On the minutes for the commission meeting on the October 15th, on page 4, there is a bulleted, right before the bullet, the commissioners were unanimous in their consensus that the town should not consider adopting an ordinance for solar energy systems that are greater than 10 kilowatts. I think we should change an ordinance to a streamlined ordinance, because we were very specific about the streamlined ordinance. And that's my only comment on that one. And then on the other minutes from the Planning Commission workshop meeting, I've got comment on page 1. Mr. Rothman is identified as Mr. Roth on that 3rd paragraph. And on page 3, there's a typo right before the reference to the 2,500 square feet. And then in 2 different paragraphs, Mr. Rothman is referred to as Mr. Newton. In the paragraph after the second of those, it says, in response to Vice Chair Caroline, Mr. Rothman said the approximate lot area for the cluster design development is 1 to 1.5 acres. Mr. Moore confirmed that rezoning will be necessary, and I think you should add rezoning will be necessary under this approach. And then on page 5, I'm identified as Commissioner Newman. That's it.
Okay, any other comments on the minute?
Oh, all right. I was absent on October 15th. It stated that earlier, but then I approved the agenda. So I'm not sure who was who approved the agenda, but I wasn't there.
So is that correction, no, all the corrections are noted, so do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as corrected and commented on?
I motion to approve the minutes as noted.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And I'm abstaining on the October 22nd. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Aye.